us, but it will tell us that we are live, ladies and gentlemen.
No reveal.
Yeah, no reveal needed. An extreme close-up for this program. It's the 4,000th episode of the Audible, man. That's something that's worth celebrating. That's something that's worth talking about. That's something that's worth going on and on about, Bloom. And we've got a bunch of special guests lined up. Some will be a surprise. Some will be, people that you've heard about on this show. And yeah, man, we are here, Bloom, not necessarily to talk about football, although that's what we'll do because that's what we do, but just to kind of reflect on, since 2006, we've done this 4,000 times. Like, that's saying something.
Yeah. Well, to endurance, right? To building something that lasts. And anybody that's listening right now or watching has been part of building that. So this accomplishment belongs to everybody. And really it echoes through anything in your life when you find that golden thread and you can follow it and create something that takes on a life of its own. And it's always been centered around mostly us just hanging out and sharing how at least with the handshake of football, how being here on this plane is striking us and creating connections through that. So it's really something, Cecil. I've thought a lot about this since we talked about this, a couple of weeks ago, this idea.
Right.
And one of the things I hope that this stands for, and I think it does, is that something good that has happened in our adult lives, we're getting on the older side of adult, is that the media became democratized. And again, I've talked about this before on the show a few times, but I think that we were practicing for this when we were little kids, right?
You're right.
And now with the barriers to entry lowered, people really can, especially if it's something that echoes your passion, your enthusiasm, what lights you up, what turns you on. If people can share in that feeling of being turned on by something, and there are other people out there that feel that way, that we can all be our own creators and producers and makers and community makers. And hopefully that's part of a larger trend of power and influence being distributed to the people, basically. And this is one way that it has been redistributed to the people. And I think that it's just been fantastic to create this little fire, this hearth of a good feeling. And it's a good feeling that's throughout the whole fantasy football social media world for the most part. And just participate in something that is, like we always say, is positive.
Yeah, just spread that positivity and just look at how much podcasting is like changing lives and fortunes and everything. Like I listen to my station, of course. But really, Bloom, I just listen to podcasts. I watch podcasts, I listen to podcasts, and I enjoy them. And right now, the very first guest who joins us, and we're going to have guests coming in and out of this show. He's down in Tampa at the Super Bowl. His name is Frank Schwab.
Yeah.
And he has joined us right now. Frank, baby, what's going on, man?
Actually, not in Tampa. It's the weird year, man. I'm not down there. It's this weird COVID year. I'm at home, but I'm glad to be on with you guys. That's what makes it okay.
Yeah, glad to be on with you because the first time I met you was probably like the 2007 draft, something like that. Yeah, it was out of Dove Valley, and you were like, I listened to your podcast. You might have been one of the first people that said to me, like, I listened to your podcast. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Frank Schwab.
The funny thing about I was thinking about this before when you texted me yesterday. I was thinking about your 4,000 show. Congratulations, by the way. It's awesome. But I was thinking how weird our friendship all is because I got to know you guys through the podcast, not the other way around. Like usually, you listen, you got friends. I'll go listen to them. But no, I respected you guys. I loved listening to you guys. I felt almost like a fan coming up to you. Like, hey, I listen. And same with Sig. I met him out at Dallas training camp, Cowboys Broncos training camp. Came up, was like, hey, I love the show. And then you guys are cool. You guys are great. And it was just fun. But then it's so weird that I came to be friends with you guys basically because I liked the show first, and then I found out you're pretty cool, off the microphone too. But by the way, congratulations! This is awesome. I mean, to do. I just was thinking about how long I've been listening to you guys because I like listening to smart people, right? Like I know the game, I cover the game. Obviously, I think I know a little bit about the game, but I always like having smart people to listen to. You guys have just been phenomenal. Your chemistry's great. To do this for so long is just everything about it's great. Just congratulations, y'all.
Oh, thanks, Frank. Really,
he's taking it back.
Well, no, I mean, look, I don't like. Remember, Cecil, when we were on the road with another guest we'll hopefully have later, Mark Felletti, and I remember once he told me, like, you don't have to say that you're the worst when someone gives you a compliment. Like, when people give me a compliment, it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me, like, deeply uncomfortable, right? I want to get my whip out and self-flagellate. But really, I think that, I think part of what you're talking about, Frank, stands for the idea that something about the game of football, there's like among us is again with the idea of being turned on, like it electrifies our mind to watch it. Like what's happening in football is electrifying, and we love sharing our sparks, back and forth of the way the game stimulates us. And there's this whole latent community out there of people who just wanted to hang out. And yes, it's talking about football and sharing what you see and perceive about football, but it's really a way to make friendships and human connections that last. Which resonates with the NFL. The NFL is a league of relationships. I mean, in some ways, at this time in the coaching carousel, there's another side to that where that can mean something negative. But in the positive way, it's, people that are part of each other's lives outside of football. And I think that's something that we've created, as you talked about, as you referenced, like, just getting to hang out outside of the context of covering a game, being on the sidelines together or something like that.
Yeah, it's always been a great equalizer, right? Like, I mean, we could have different political views. We could come from different backgrounds. We can come from different places in the country, anything. But, we could all speak the language of football. And the thing I love about football, you guys are great at expressing, hey, you guys love the game. I love the game. We all do. But you guys it could be different things to different people. You guys are huge. You love scouting. You love scouting the draft. You love scouting the bottoms of the rosters. And that's beautiful for some people. Some people love the violence of the sport. That's not my thing. But I love the strategy of the sport. I love the X's and O's. I love the back and forth, the coaches, the chess game they're playing. We can all love football at so many different levels. And it could all bring us together. That's the beauty of this. It's the beauty of friendships like we have. And, I've hung out with Cecil a million times here in Denver, just not even talking football, but we got brought together because of football, and that's still our common language. And it's just this beautiful game that we all enjoy. And you guys have done such a good job of kind of being one of the conversation pieces of it. I mean, it's when I still, even, to this day, I've covered the NFL 20 years. I don't really feel like this football season kicks off until I hear the preseason watch list. I really don't. Like, it's true. Like, I hear you guys, and I'm like, I hear that bumper music, and you guys, I mean, once in a while I get shouted out. It's so fun, but it still gets me excited. Like, oh wow, these guys are going to be talking about something I'll pick I may not have known about, but now I'm going to watch him when it comes to these preseason games once we have preseason again. But I mean, so it's just been this beautiful thing, and to realize, to kind of sit back of myself and realize I've been listening to you guys for. How long has it been? When was your first show? What year?
2006.
So 14 years, 15 years almost. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to do anything that long and to still have the passion you guys have for it. It's phenomenal.
Frank,
I love it.
I want to know, and my final question for you, we're not keeping everybody, that we don't want to intrude with everybody's time, especially during Super Bowl week, but because we need to have a show with you where we just talk and talk and talk.
We do that at Buffalo Wild Wings,
we do that. We do that at Guns N' Roses and Snoop Dogg.
Yeah. Right. We're just. That
was like peak Cecil Lammey, peak Frank Schwab time. That's a great intersection of realities there. But how in the hell were you listening to podcasts in 2007, whenever the first time we met? Like, that was such a.
Oh man,
we started the Audible when they weren't even called podcasts. Like, so how did you, as an early adopter, you probably had one of the old iPods with the click wheel or something.
No, that's what it was. I was just thinking about that.
Was that because you got an iPod and then you were like, okay, I can't listen to radio on this, but I can listen to these shows? Like, how in the world were you such an early adopter of what eventually became podcasting?
And it's just one of those things that I've thought about that before too. Like, when did I start listening to podcasts? Why did I start listening to podcasts? And I honestly think with you guys, my intro to was to football guys was the Draft Dominator. I had somebody tell me like, dude, this is a pretty cool tool. This is, back in the early days before everybody had a draft software. I, by the way, still use Draft Dominator every single draft I do just to have another voice, And I think from that, I heard about the Audible. I'm like, wow, podcasts. Okay, I'll listen to these two guys. And they're pretty funny and they know their stuff. I'll keep listening, and eventually loved it. But I think that's how it became to be. Even though I covered the league, again, 20 years, I like having smart people on my side. And the funny thing is, I've told you guys this. We've talked about this. When I started with football, using football guys, just as, I love fantasy football, all that kind of stuff. I feel bad because I didn't want to tell anybody about it. I didn't want to tell anybody, like, I thought I had this secret, right? And then one of my buddies in one of my longest running IDP league, I was on with you guys or something, and he texts me. He's like, hey, nice job on the Audible with Cecil and Sig. I'm like, he knows about it. And now everybody knows about you guys. But back then it used to be like Fight Club. Like, I don't want to let this secret out. These guys are really, really sharp. They're smart. I love you. I love spreading the word. But at the same time, I want to kind of keep it to myself of how brilliant you guys were. And now the secret's out of the bag. Everybody knows. I have no edges anymore.
Frank, for my final question. It's great to see you, man.
It's great.
You might be the original Audible meme or in joke.
No. You know what one I just used this week? I just brought up Roxo, the rock and roll clown.
Yeah.
I just brought it up. I was like, I guess cocaine got brought up somehow.
Right.
Not in a bad way, but I was like, it just reminded me of it. I had to tell the whole story.
Oh, it was wonderful. The early days, Blog Talk Radio days.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this, every story in some ways has similarities. In this case, it's the early wild years, Blog Talk Radio, the second hour of the live show. You never knew what might happen. But to go back to something that has a little more gravity, but you've been doing this long enough that you've really watched the change from the traditional monolithic media, print, TV, radio, gatekeepers to now the gates are wide open. Anybody can do whatever they want. And in fact, we see in real time, like different things take off and become popular or resonate with people and link people together and create these communities and revenue flows and so on than we might expect or even understand. And, we're not young. None of us are young.
No.
How has that been for you? And as somebody who's, still making your living in this world, what are you looking forward to? Like, what do you think is coming next?
And that's the thing. It's crazy. Like before I came on with you guys, I was just, I had to cut my hair and shave because I'm doing video right after this. Like for Yahoo, like it's just, and I wasn't doing that. Like I got in traditionally. I threw newspapers and I did that for 15 years or whatever. And now you're right. It's everybody has a voice, and if you're smart enough, I hope your voice gets amplified and you get found out. And there's still. It's not just this old traditional media. And also just what we talk about has changed, I think. Back when I started really covering the NFL 2000, it was, you never talked about fantasy among like beat writers. Like you couldn't be serious if you were talking about fantasy. You never talked about gambling. And right now, like one of my main jobs at Yahoo is shifting to the gambling side. I write about it all the time and I love it. It's like, it's just not only just the mediums have changed, but also the content has changed. It's okay to talk about fantasy football as a mainstream guy because everybody does it. Because I think what we realized, and you guys were pioneers in this, I believe, that you're not talking fantasy football. You're talking football. Like fantasy football writers and people who do podcasts and all that kind of stuff. You realize after a while they're football writers. They're talking about maybe with a different slant, but they're smart football people talking about football, enjoying football. It's not fantasy football; it's football. And I think that has changed. I do. I think that has changed a ton of guys like you and others in the business too. And also gambling. I consider talk about gambling angles for Super Bowl or whatever. But I'm still talking football. It's just a different slant, a different way people appreciate the game. And so I think that has changed, not just the mediums and doing videos and podcasts and writing, for a 24-hour news cycle and all the things have changed medium-wise, but also content has changed too. And there could be different voices, different ways to appreciate the game. I think you guys, again, I really do give you guys a lot of credit, not just you two, but football guys as a whole for bringing this out of, hey, we're not talking fantasy football. We're talking football. You can get fantasy tips from this and enjoy it that way. But we are football guys, as your name says, and I always respected that, and you guys allowed me to see, oh yeah, these fantasy writers or whoever, they're talking football, they know football. It's just a different slant to it.
I just want to say real quick, Frank Schwab is a perfect name for like your gambling tout. You know, it's like Charles Schwab. Charles Schwab gives you your financial advice. Yeah, and his brother Frank, you met his cousin Frank? He's got some good tips for the game.
The black sheep of the family who's betting on Illinois basketball last night. Yeah.
Frank Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, Yahoo Sports. Follow him on Twitter at Yahoo Schwab. Frank, my man, great as always. Let's hang out like as soon as the Super Bowl's over.
Yes, this week's busy. But, hey, I just want, again, congrats, you guys. I love y'all. Listen to your show just not as your friend has been great, but as your friend and being able to DM you and text you my dumb questions has been even better. So I appreciate y'all. Keep doing it forever. I don't want to ever have a time when I'm not listening to the preseason watch list. All right. So keep on keeping on. You guys do a great job, man. Congrats.
And there we have him, ladies and gentlemen. Very humbled to hear that from our buddy Frank Schwab. And the hits keep on coming, because next up, it's our man Michael Schottey, Brawl Network. Schottey, what's good, man? I just saw you last week at the Senior Bowl, man.
Yeah, it's been a while. I just want to start by saying I need like a dot by dot over the years of when you two started to look more like one another. I do feel like you are an old married couple that has just over the years morphed into just one person that kind of looks like the Audible logo, quite frankly.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that. And hey, the more I can look like Bloom, I guess the better off I'll be. But Schottey, this medium of podcasting, right? We started this in 2006. This is our 4,000th episode. You've been knee deep in the podcasting new media world, whether it's Bleacher Report, whether it's your current role at Brawl Network. Like, let's just talk about how this has changed, because like when we met, and I think we met around 2010, probably one of those Shrine games, right? Down in Orlando, something like that. It's like podcasting was still a little bit in its infancy. Now, 10 years later, since you and I've met, Schottey, like everybody has a podcast, and podcasts, it's absolutely huge, and it's its own kind of universe now. So let's talk about just how this industry has changed and really just kind of been born, over the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, I think, first of all, you guys asking me that question is silly because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. I got my start in terrestrial radio, a lot like you, Cecil. And the only difference being I got my start on literally, not hyperbole, the smallest AM radio station in America, up in rural Minnesota. Right before us was a fishing show, and I think after us was like German language programming. So our little sports show, all it did was give us press credentials. That was the only thing. They felt like they were doing us a favor, and quite frankly, they were giving us that airtime. So no money was changed hands. It was just really, if something happened on the girls' softball team, we got preempted in a hurry, no matter who we had as a guest. We have like Wayne Gretzky coming on, and no, Wayne, you got to stop. We got to reschedule this for another week because someone caught a big bass out on Lake Minnetonka. So when we left that terrestrial radio show and all sort of went our separate ways after college, we looked at podcasting as a way to sort of keep it going, but at the same time, turned our noses up at it. Like, no one was doing podcasting back then. It was just like this weird thing. And if you weren't on a terrestrial radio station, you weren't considered legit. And quite frankly, even by the NFL standards, they weren't credentialing people that had podcasts back then. But I think you guys did the whole world a real service in sort of getting this podcast going. And over the years, we've seen more and more legit sports people, I say both tongue in cheek and seriously, legit sports people going to the podcasting world now, where Adam Schefter has his own podcast and quite frankly goes toe to toe in this realm with guys like PFT Commenter and with guys like the Colts punter whose name is Pat McAfee, right, who in traditional media terms, Adam Schefter, who covers the NFL at a spot that, none of us can even fathom, and the former president of Professional Football Writers of America, he, as a podcaster, hopes to aspire to be a couple of schmucks on Barstool, or a couple of schmucks on the Football Guys. So there is just something both egalitarian and wonderful about this medium that I love.
Yeah, it is just, it's got a life of its own. I feel like, man, when I see you and I go back to the Bleacher Report.
I got
that
a couple
original
of football cards of you guys.
I know, right? The original Bleacher Report class when Bleacher Report, and that in some ways was a big milestone along the way that these two worlds merged. And in the end, it's still all made up of people, all of us people.
Right.
And I guess while you're here, I want to ask you, because I'm going to say this a lot of times, Cecil. I'm so uncomfortable with praise. I'm so uncomfortable with any sort of compliment or positive attention. So I want to ask you, in your time in the football media, who's somebody out there whose work that you really, either were inspired by or wanted to emulate, or just as a person? I'm thinking like Vaughn McClure. Like, God, we lost so many people in the last year. That still, I can't even remember who it was that brought up Vaughn McClure, like at a coaching introductory press conference, again, about relationships. So it can be calling on a relationship. Just who do you want to recognize while we are kind of putting spotlight and stepping back and thinking about this football media world?
Yeah, wow, put me on the spot. There are a lot, and I've sort of always modeled myself after probably a little bit somewhere between, if we're going really lofty, I try to be a little bit more like Peter King, just with my perspective. I want to be tapped in, but not so tapped in that I'm trying to break news 24/7. I want to have takes that aren't really quite hot, that are super informed. So that's someone, and I vividly remember, and speaking just egalitarian, Twitter, sort of back in the day was the great leveling of the playing field. So I've always, regarded Peter King really highly, Adam Schefter the same way. And I remember the day where like both of them were in my DMs about an article I wrote, and it was like, holy crap, well, what did I do? Like I had 2,000 followers at the time, and pre-blue check mark. So those are just two guys I would shout out. Daniel Jeremiah also, just in terms of, and I guess I'm not doing my like who I emulate or as much as just who I really appreciate. Daniel Jeremiah, Matt Bowen are both two people that I don't really deserve from a football mind to be on the same playing field as. Both of them over the years have been super kind to me. Back when I had my first post radio podcast, it was called Draftcast. Me and a guy by the name of Hunter Ansley were doing it at the time. And DJ was like our second guest, which when you fast forward to now, like I can't believe that happened. We had like 3 listeners for that show. But DJ was super gracious. John Thornton early on, was doing sort of the pseudo media thing. Now he's an agent. But also Matt Bowen. My time at Bleacher Report, I hired 2 guys, and I just feel super gracious that I had the ability to work with them even for a short amount of time. Matt Bowen and Field Yates, who one day I guarantee that is your booth for Monday Night Football. When it happens, I will be like a proud papa, even though they only worked for me for like a grand total of like 3 minutes combined.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty good 3 minutes. Schottey, at Schottey on Twitter, now with the Brawl Network. Who do you miss from the football world? You and I have seen tons of people come and go, right? And we've built some great friends. We've had some friends that go on to do other things. So my final question for you, Schottey, is just about like maybe some of the one person that you miss on the road, that you miss that used to cover football. Hell, I missed you when you took your break from covering football, and now you're back with the Brawl Network. So is there somebody that you're just like, man, I miss talking football with that guy?
Yeah, I'd throw this out there. Both of us have mentioned Wes Bunting. He was sort of on that draft circuit with us.
Loved him,
for a
man.
long
So
time.
smart.
He's pastoring up in Pennsylvania area now. So if I ever get a chance to get up there, I'm going to pop in and watch him from the pulpit and ask him what he thinks of my 40 time. But the other one, I mean, I hate to say it like they're gone, because they're not gone, but I would love to see Chad Ryder get a spot like he used to have. He used to be like the face of CBS's draft coverage. Now he's sort of behind the scenes at NFL Network. I'd love for him to show out. He was actually our guest on the Brawl 22. And I'd say something similar about Sean Jensen. Sean, who I knew covering the Vikings once upon a time, and then he went to the Bears. Now he's writing children's books, and he's doing fantastic. I love the books. I buy them for my kids. But if he ever gets the hanker and wants to come back to covering a sport full time, I will be all in with whoever that is.
Schottey, we talked about Frank. Talked about how he knew us from the show, even though it should have been that we knew him from his work. this idea, we'll come back to this, I'm sure, a lot in the 4 hours. You never know who's listening. We've talked about this. We talked about this at the beginning, Cecil. You never know who's listening. And you talked about, Peter King getting into your DMs and things like that. If you can, retrace your steps back to the first time that you maybe were a little bit in awe when you found out who was listening when you were starting out.
When I was starting out, I would say the first real thing that I covered was the Combine, probably like 2009, 2010. And when I went to the Combine, there was a surprisingly large amount of like traditional media guys who at least knew who I was when they read the badge. They were probably surprised at what I looked like, or, surprised that I wasn't exactly like my Twitter, avatar at the time. But when they saw me, they're like, oh yeah, Mike Schottey. And, different people sort of convinced me at that time to get in with the Pro Football Writers of America. I was one of the first like bloggers, quote unquote, in that group, because they were really pushing at the time. Alex Marvez specifically was pushing, and Alex Marvez knew me. And I was like, whoa, how does Alex Marvez, who's the outgoing president, know who I am? And he's like, oh yeah, we got to join. And it really was drinks after dinner that, kind of solidified, the current president at the time being like, yeah, we'll start letting bloggers in. But the coolest moment for my career, and whenever you do interviews, and I was doing a lot of them for a long time, and I would always do the craziest interviews. Like Pepsi wants you to interview so-and-so, and you're going to talk about Pepsi for 2 seconds, but then talk about football for the rest of 30 minutes. Awesome. I'll do it. And I did a series of them with like Call of Duty, and I did a series of them with all these crazy things that came towards Bleacher Report, because they wanted to pump up their product, but it gave me the chance to really talk football with some really cool people. And the general consensus was like, oh yeah, Mike Schottey, I know you, blah, blah, blah. And I always sort of just took it as blowing smoke. But then Tony Dungy referenced an article I had written, and how he was like appreciative of how I put a certain like thing about defense. And I was like, like this guy isn't just blowing smoke. He actually can like cite chapter. And even if he had just done that, or if some PR person had just done that for him seconds earlier, it was such a like gracious thing for him to do, versus the regular like Clay Matthews is like, oh yeah, I love your work. Clay Matthews had never read my work. Like it's okay. I'm fine with that. But for Tony Dungy to do that, that was pretty cool.
Mike Schottey, ladies and gentlemen, at Schottey. Check him out at the Brawl Network now as well. Schottey, great catching up with you. I told you when we were in Mobile, the only reason I went out to the bar was because you were going to be there, because I wanted to catch up with my buddies. So it's great talking to you then. Great talking to you now. Thank you very much for joining us here in our celebration of the Audible's 4,000th episode, man. And I know we'll be catching up real soon and talking some more football.
Absolutely. Congrats to you guys. And here's to 4,000 more.
There we have him. Mike Schottey, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue and keep rolling. And Bloom, the chat room is so busy. I can't even begin to think of keeping up with our chat room.
Yeah, that's great. No, that, and that's the whole thing, things creating like a life of their own. The chat room, it's seen some wild moments, but mostly positive. Again, Cease, I think we've somehow been insulated from the scarier parts of the internet, for the most part. Every now and then it's like a little bit will leak or bleed through, but we're lucky that everyone's pretty cool.
We're lucky to have this guy on our team because he's Chris Harp. Chris, what's going on now? He is my college roommate. He is one of the few people that have actually seen me dunk a basketball, and he does Football Guys clips at Clips FBG. You see him in the chat room. Now your username's like a million years long, like Jedi Sith Lord 23.
Yeah, Jedi Sith Lord 23.
Jedi Sith Lord 23. See, I got it. So, Chris, welcome to the show. I know you listen a lot. You are involved in doing our clips. So let's just talk about podcasting, man, and like how you enjoy the medium, how the medium's changed, maybe even other podcasts you listen to, because it's funny how you and I, we're great friends in college, and then life happens and we go our separate ways. And then all of a sudden, we reconnect again. And it's through podcasting, it's through radio, it's through this. And then to have you jump on to do our clips at Clips FBG for people out there, like it's like a fun ad on top of our YouTube channel here.
Yeah. Well, going back in a little bit in time, I had totally lost track of you. Like after we went our separate ways from college, I joined the military. And then when I found out it was you that I was listening to on the podcast, that I was listening to, I don't even remember how it was. I don't know if it was my iPod or if it was online somewhere. I don't exactly remember, but it was you. And then I got a friend. I was like, nah, I don't know if that's Cecil I knew from school, but you sent me a friend request on Facebook. I was like, oh, I guess it is, because I heard you on the radio too. You had guest spots on the radio, and I was like, oh, I guess it is. So. It was really cool to reconnect from that. But as far as like listening to podcasts, I listened to before, even if I wasn't involved at all, I would listen to your podcast because you guys drop so much knowledge, and, knowledge is power. And, I want that advantage when it comes to fantasy football, but I also like your just regular football takes. You guys make a lot of sense. And sometimes I'll have an idea and then Cecil will be like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I'll revisit then.
Right. Well, and you've been playing fantasy football 20, 30, 25 years, like long time.
Yeah. Since 1992, 91, somewhere in there.
Longer than me then. I started in 93.
Yeah, everything was on paper. We, had a commissioner, and we had to meet up to have a draft. And yeah.
Chris, first of all, thank you. It's great to meet you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. I mean that in more ways than one. I want to ask you, because you watch us and listen to us. I mean, I'll make a confession. Cecil and I've talked about this before. Like, I barely ever listen to our show or watch our show. Like, I feel like we're up on the high wire, but I don't realize it. And if I start watching or listening to us, I might realize it and fall. But you are watching and listening to us. Tell me something either about me or Cecil. It can be some physical thing or something we do with our voices or something we do with our faces that we probably don't realize that we do, because you have to watch and listen to us a lot. And you have to clip it and put it together.
Yeah, no. Okay. Well, first of all, when it comes to Sig, you're just so thorough, but it makes a lot of sense to even, the brightest people. And I just love the way that you lay things out. When it comes to Cecil, he's the same way. Cecil will speak his mind a little more than you do. And that's fine. I love that that's one of the Cecil's best traits, is he tells it how it is. But yeah, you guys are so knowledgeable. I can't emphasize that enough. And so when I'm watching your videos, I look for those nuggets of good information to clip, so then I could share them out to social media.
Yeah, and our clips is, again, so much fun, such a value add to what we do for the YouTube channel. And Chris, we certainly appreciate you for doing that and for, joining us in the chat room, man. You're always going back and forth. You usually have breaking news in our chat room, right? You'll tell people, we might even be talking about something and be like, no, that guy's out.
Yeah,
so I always keep an eye on that
closely, and I retweet it. I try to keep on top of it. Any good news, I try to retweet it. Even if I'm doing, other things, I stop what I'm doing and retweet it. I just try to keep on top of it.
Who's your best fantasy player of all time? And if you say John Elway, well, it might be true because you played back when John Elway played. But
Brian Westbrook was the best I've ever had.
Okay,
he was amazing because he was so involved. This is back when Andy Reid was at the Eagles.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brian Westbrook.
Austin Lee, Cecil. Austin Lee said in the chat room, serious Funko Pop collection there.
Oh yeah.
Is there like one prize? Is there one that, like, if there was a fire and you can only grab one, that's the one you grab?
What about that Anakin statue that your daughter got you that you showed me? Like, look at him. He's going back in the collection. He's like, give it 1 second.
Yeah.
And I think Austin has a great appreciation for Funkos as well.
That's all Star Wars.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Those are all the action figures, but yeah, let me get that.
And Austin, by the way, if you're listening, I sent you a link because you're up next, buddy. So did you get it? There it is. There it is. And it's limited to what? 3,000? How many pieces of that?
5,000.
5,000.
Yeah,
limited to 5,000.
But my most prized possession I have right now is for Funko Pops, at least, is a Mandalorian. That came out. It was exclusive to Funko Shop. I got lucky and got one, and it's worth $300 now.
Okay.
$2, so Mandalorian.
There you go.
And the Mandalorian, yeah.
Well, we appreciate you, Chris. We'll be talking soon, brother. We'll probably be hanging out soon as well. And thanks very much for joining our celebration here of the 4,000th episode of the Audible, man.
Thanks for having me. I mean, congratulations to you both.
Right on. There we have him. That's Chris Harp, ladies and gentlemen. And again, Jedi Sith Lord 23 in our chat room. And yeah, we've got, I sent that link to Austin Lee. So he should be coming up next, Bloom. But this is fun, man. This is fun just going back and forth with everybody. And, you know, like just talking about how you got here, you know?
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I was reminded when Schottey was talking, I think, about how when we did Draft Guys TV, we had these mottos or missions, you know, which I used to think was kind of, you know, I don't know what the value is when you have a mission statement, but, you know, breaking down barriers, glory to the game, coverage for the thinking fan. And I think another thing like that, dare I say this stuff is like corporate culture, you know, makes me revile, like, ugh.
Right.
You know, like I'm here on
Makes
the
you
Audible.
withdraw, like,
I'm sitting in my bedroom, like in the t-shirt I pulled off the top of my drawer this morning for this great occasion. Corporate culture. I mean, whatever. Part of the reason I never became an attorney is I didn't want to wear a tie every day. But I think there's an idea that when you accomplish something, you celebrate it. Like make sure to do something to celebrate it, right? So for those people who are taking time out of their day, have been taking time out of their day for a long time to like make this possible, maybe this show can also stand for that idea. Like when there's something to celebrate. And I'm in New Orleans, so there's always something to celebrate. We'll make up reasons to celebrate. So come by and see our house float, folks, if you're in New Orleans.
Yeah, because people are decorating their houses this year, right?
Yeah, it's the spirit, man. Like I was watching, it was on Good Morning America. They did a piece on the New Orleans house floats. And Chawa, which is an awesome group, does like Mardi Gras Indian music. You know, the Mardi Gras Indian with them said, we're going to find a way to celebrate our culture. Like we're going to find a way to celebrate our culture because we want to celebrate our culture. And I think that taking out this moment and doing this show today, other than just getting a chance to hang out, because I'm always in a good mood when I do the show. It always makes me feel good. Right. It's the people. It's the energy.
Well, it's you and it's our audience, man. Like we've said it a million times, but it's so true. Like when I step into this world, like it's a world of positivity and happiness, man. It's good. Yeah. It's a great community, you know, great community, bright football minds, funny people, great people that we've met along the way. Our chat room is just full of great guys. I mean, I couldn't even begin to start listing off, you know, all of our favorites, because everyone that comes in and makes us part of their day, like time's all we got. It's our most precious asset. So if you're spending time with us, wow, thanks, man. Like it's been a lot of fun.
And also take time to celebrate things in your life. Everybody listen, if you hear my voice, take time to celebrate the things that you've accomplished, because everybody's life, everybody's story is like special and compelling. Really, there's things about all of us that if we just sat down and talked to each other, that we'd be amazed by each other. We're all miracles in our own way, you know. So celebrate.
Yeah, celebrate and enjoy. That's for sure. So while we wait for our guests, and you never know who's going to pop in, the big game is here. Kansas City versus Tampa. New customers can play for free from the $1 million with their first deposit, thanks to our partnership with DraftKings. Create your DraftKings DFS account and make a deposit. DraftKings will credit your account with a free contest entry. Draft your lineup and compete for the $1 million top prize. Just go to dkng.co/big game. That is dkng.co/big game. Enter now. Offer ends on 2/7 at kickoff. Minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for full terms and conditions. You didn't know Frank was going to join the show, did you?
No, I didn't know Frank. Frank's great. Warm. Oh, it's always great. And again, he fits into the Audible community. Frank Schwab, Brandon Standifer said in the chat room. It's one of the names. It's great, Cecil. It's a whole chapter in the Audible that there are names that Cecil says differently when he says them. It's really great. Cecil, it's really funny because everyone's being so positive today. But like, we don't need any positivity because people give that to us every day that they listen, Like, hearing all the praise makes me feel like, but you're giving the gift to us. We're not giving the gift to you, because who doesn't want to hear that feel that their opinion is valued, right? Especially as dudes, Cease. Especially when it's sports. Like, that's like a currency in dude culture to be like,
Right.
This guy knows something about sports. You should listen to him. Like, that fills us up. If someone's like, oh, I care about your opinion, I will listen of what you have to say. So absolutely, I think that the positivity we have in the audience is great, and that's why, again, I keep finding myself wanting to direct it back to other people like Frank Schwab, who's always been so kind. And Cease, the people are just so tolerant. It's great, Cease. Like, I guess there's some people we've annoyed and they just aren't around because we're annoying to them. But for everybody else, like they think it's great that there are names that Cecil says in the Cecil way every time he says it. Or I remember finding out that I stutter or stammer and things like that. And nobody that listens to the show has ever tried to make me feel like, oh, why, that's unprofessional or something like that. Or otherwise, our audience is just so accepting. That's the thing. Like, for everybody in life to feel as accepted as we feel by our audience.
Well, and how liberating, like, just podcasting has been in terms of just getting things off your chest. It's why so many people have podcasts now. And I always encourage that. I always get the, I want to do what you do question, right? How do I do what you do? How do I do blah, blah? And the first thing I tell people, and this is what I got, but I always say, start a podcast. Because if they'll usually be, younger people, sometimes not, but they'll, be in broadcasting school or whatever, Bloom, and you were at Syracuse in broadcasting school. So you know what it's like. And now, there's a little bit more freedom. And so I always say, start a podcast because you're going to get in reps. Like, the one thing that makes you an expert, Peyton Manning's talked about this, like, you need 10,000 reps to be an expert. Well, we're 4,000, so we're almost halfway there, Bloom. Don't make me do math, but like, just doing reps, doing repetitions, getting into the flow, knowing how to talk, knowing how to, let's say Cox Internet goes down in New Orleans and I've got to carry the show for, 3 minutes while your internet comes back, or vice versa, right? If my internet dropped right now, you could keep talking and not even worry about it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just from doing repetition. So whenever I get I want to do what you do, start a podcast. And it's about whatever you want, whatever you like. And I sound like T.I., right? Like, whatever you like. Like, just start a show on whatever subject. Like, I watch Comic Tom's podcast, Comic Tom 101 on YouTube. And he's some, younger guy up in Washington that just loves comic books. His dad used to run a comic book shop. And it's like fantastic just to be part of, that world, if you will. So, all right. So, I mean, whatever the subject, that's what you can start your passion with, right? And talk about it and get things off your chest and have fun with it. Like, football is very serious, Bloom, right? It's very buttoned up. It's very serious time. It's not necessarily supposed to be, let's have some fun with it. Let's talk about it and let's do it, man. And that's what's so invigorating about this world, is that whatever you love, Chris loves Funko Pops. He could probably start a damn Funko Pop podcast and be pretty popular. Like, I love comic books. I love football. You love football. Like, just start it on what you love and start talking about it, man.
Yeah. It's, there's a whole other layer we could delve into of, why have podcasts become such a big deal? Like, it's weird, right? Because again, the world we came up in, Cease, with the monolithic print, radio, TV, it was very polished. The presentation was always very polished, and it was it was a media product for your consumption. And podcasting is so, I mean, it's produced and edited, but like you said, you could speak for 3 minutes if my internet went out. And I think 2020, especially Zoom calls and the way we've lived virtually online in a lot of different ways, has really introduced people to the idea. It's like real life, you know,
Right.
like the clips when the dog comes in or the kid comes in or whatever,
Right.
you know. And I do think that podcasting has created something a little more authentic. And like you said, and like I said earlier, people that are listening, well, it's funny, Cecil, I'll go off on a tangent here because I feel like, and I don't say this to be self-aggrandizing, although I'm probably self-aggrandizing when I don't realize I am or something like that. But I hear a lot of people have said over the years, Cecil, that like people that are doing well in our industry say like part of what that gave them their start was that listening to us, you know. And there's a way you could take it as an insult or a slight and be like, you're out there thinking like Howard Cosell, right? Like I could do better than that, you know. Howard Cosell is probably the original media person I wanted to be, by the way, as a kid growing up. But he was a lawyer and he heard the sports broadcasters and he was like, I can be better than them. So that's a way where you'd say, well, I got my start because I was listening to you. But I think it's more in the sense, Cease, as it's really your spirit, I think, the spark that lit the fuse of just do it. Like you can just do it. Well, let's just do that. And I think it's a great time for makers and creators and have the ability, and it's standing for that individual voice. And like we said, like what you love, what turns you on, because it's enthusiasm, it's positivity. And now more than ever in our country, in our culture, we need to be reminded of what we love about being alive, what we love about the world of people. Like Frank said, there's no handshake in football based on like what your politics are. It's just how the game is slanting through your brain and all the thoughts that it sets off. And I think that podcasting is allowing us to have a positive presence in each other's lives when the public life is getting like chillier and chillier, and hopefully we can, you know, turn up the temperature.
Turn up the temperature with Austin Lee, ladies and gentlemen. Austin, such great to have you on here celebrating our 4,000th episode of the Audible. Austin, great to have your show in the Power Grid, part of the Audible family, our FBG digital print here. The YouTube channel, which you guys have helped grow so very much. Like, and I'll be honest, like, talk a little business, Austin. Like from the Audible standpoint, we probably started YouTube maybe like a year or two too late because we're Google Hangouts, and like I can go back through all the different iterations of the show. But just the efforts that you've done, brother. I mean, there's many reasons why I wanted to have you on, but one was just to thank you for just bringing such value to what we do at Football Guys with all of your work, with the DFS show, with the Power Grid, with our YouTube channel. And it's great to have you on, man.
Thanks, man. That's a lot of really kind words. I feel honored just to be a part of sort of the Audible family and you trusting me to, you know, try to manage the YouTube channel and grow it as best that I can. Because I feel like I'm riding on your guys' coattails, kind of coming in late in the game, and you know, you guys have set me up with like a 3-touchdown lead. Like this is easy. I just like waltz in, you know. It's like kicking a 20-yard field goal, you know. So thank you for that. Thank you for letting me be a part of all of this.
Well, and let's talk about how just podcasting has changed, right? Because this first show, the very first show of the Audible, I recorded on a cassette over speakerphone. Then I put that cassette, I burned it to a CD. Then I took that CD, I put it on the computer, and then I took that file and I uploaded it to our servers. And that's how the first episode of the Audible happened. And they weren't even called podcasts. This was 2006. So let's just talk about this medium and how it's changed the YouTube channel, which you manage for us, you know, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. But like just how all of this, the way that you ingest media now has changed, and largely due to podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, looking at kind of where we are now, I love that you guys have this sort of like live chat, live interaction with the community, because I think that this show, that you guys have built over decades, is really about the community. It's this fellowship of football fans who want football year long. And by sort of inviting them into the conversation and chatting with them during a show, it just enhances that experience. So I love that we're using different kinds of media to connect with the people we love. I mean, we love these guys we hang out with on these shows. We love chatting with them in the YouTube comments, chatting with them in the live stream. Like it wouldn't be anything without them. And so just bringing all of us closer together with new technology is exciting.
Austin.
Yes,
How are you?
Sig.
I wish I could hug you.
I wish I could hug you too.
I mean this is a tremendous compliment. Like sometimes you make me feel like I'm a lazy podcaster, that I'm like that there's like things that I should be tapping into inside of myself and sharing via how like that there aren't really bounds or limits on how we can express ourselves through this time that we share together, that we spend with each other. And I just want you to talk about how you use the show as an outlet for your creativity and your personality.
Sure. I am a big fan of performance improv. I used to be a part of a improv group that would do stage performances. And so I love this idea of, like Sig said earlier, sort of walking that high wire, but not really looking down while you're walking it. Like that is a fun rush. And so being on a live show or hosting people and you don't know what they're going to say is a super exciting craft, which is very different from what I used to do creatively a lot, which was spend 3 to 4 years on a very small task and craft that into the greatest detail and then release it into the world, which also has amazing benefits, but it's a very different process and requires a lot more patience.
Austin, you were building the pyramids.
Yeah. Austin here joining us, of course, host of the Power Grid. Just let's discuss kind of behind the scenes and just the everything that goes into crafting a YouTube channel, you know, making sure everybody's video is okay, managing audio. Like just, I always tell people, Austin, and you might have heard me say this, but when people say, hey, I want to do what you do, start a podcast. Like go on YouTube, you can broadcast. StreamYard's free. There's a free version of StreamYard that does wonderful things. Like get on there, get a camera, get chops, get reps. And then behind the scenes, Austin, because you do work in front of the camera and you do a lot of work behind the scenes as well. That's also a process that I think it's good for people to kind of know, like what it takes to create a quality product, because the Power Grid, you can put that show up against any show of any subject, right? It doesn't have to be DFS, doesn't have to be football, fantasy football, but you put up the Power Grid against any show and it shows so well. I mean, I know there's not like Emmy awards for YouTube channels, but if there was, I'd be putting my vote for the Power Grid.
Those are very kind words. I mean, there's a lot of details that go into the producing side of a show beyond just creating content and making it engaging, right? There's the lighting, there's the audio equipment, there's the chemistry between the people that are talking. There's your background. Is it going to be virtual? If so, is it going to be graphics or a photo? Like, what are you going to put a visual interest back here? Has some relevance. So there are so many little details in, tagging YouTube videos and putting descriptions. And I love adding indexes to YouTube videos because if someone gets bored, I would rather them skip 5 minutes of my video to the next spot than go somewhere else. So I like putting little indexes on there. It's like there's a lot of little details that can make your product sort of more professional and draw more attention.
And it's not necessarily a sorry, Joe, but I do love the emails from Austin when he's like, why did YouTube demonetize that video? And I was like, oh, he probably cussed on it. I'm sorry. We probably said something that we shouldn't say. Our YouTube overlords were mad. So Austin, I apologize whenever that happens.
I don't want to point any fingers or anything. It was not meant as sort of a judgmental comment. But, you might not want to mention the Cox Communication Cable Company over and over again.
Yeah, maybe.
Getting it, so that's like the opposite of getting it past the censors, right? Like we're tripping over the censors yes. by accident. What do I want to go out on, Austin?
While you're pondering this, I just love the background, the stars. Like, of course, as a big Star Wars fan, I feel like I'm in my happy place right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of like Carl Sagan, the cosmos. Like
Yes.
we're all stardust. I guess I feel like I'm interviewing you, Austin. I just want to put the spotlight back on you, because what's great is, and I appreciate this too, because let's be real, right? We're in a football world, and it's a masculine world. You know? It's really masculine, and I'm not masculine, and certainly like your energy and your enthusiasm stands out when I think of people I've encountered in this world, and it just makes me want to ask you, like, who are your influences? Like, who as a kid, like, what spoke to you in the world that like made your energy just so bright?
Thanks. I draw from a lot of different places. I tend to like people that are fun and fun loving, and they feel like they're having fun what they're doing. So it could go as far back as like
I'm thinking like the Muppets. Did you like the Muppets?
Muppets, yes. Oh, Jim Henson, yes, definitely. Muppets, yeah. But it could be like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. Like, he seems to be having so much fun. Or Lin-Manuel Miranda seems to be having so much fun in musicals. So I pull a lot from people like in the movie world, or like Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like, it could be a bunch of different sort of random people that just seem to love what they're doing. That's very inspirational. And then I look to some of the guys in the football industry who have a really great balance between knowing what they're talking about, but also valuing the entertainment side of presenting what they're talking about, right? Like, you can be super knowledgeable, but if you're not at least remotely entertaining, you're not going to be around for very long. So I love trying to strike this balance between those two worlds. And that's part of why I appreciate what you guys bring with the Audible, is that it's more than just football, right? It's inviting people into your lives. And like I think one of the chatters said earlier in this video, they said it's talking about emotional intelligence and mental health and some of the things that are going on in the world right now that people need in addition to football. And they come here for both. And I think that that's something that's really special. And I think that that's why you guys have broadcast 4,000 episodes and why you should be really proud of what you've created here.
He is Austin Lee, ladies and gentlemen, host of the Power Grid, right here on our YouTube channel and in our Audible feed as well. Austin, brother, appreciate any time with you, and always good seeing your face and listening to your voice, man. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys. Congratulations.
There we have him, Austin Lee, ladies and gentlemen, and the hits keep on coming because there's this one guy, and y'all know him, y'all love him. And I remember seeing a video, and I can't remember who did the video, Matt. And it was like with different fantasy experts, right? Experts. And I remember watching, and I was like, that guy sucks. That guy sucks. That guy sucks. And you were the last one. Like, I was in there. I was in the old 950, the fan studios, by the way. So I did my part. And of course, I thought I was brilliant. And then I was like, that guy sucks. That guy, that's terrible. This is awful. And then it got to you. And you were like in this tropical plush, like green hedges and all this, and you were giving out this information. I was like, that guy's good. That guy's good. And next thing you know, Bloom's like, how about we get this Matt Waldman guy on our show? And I was like, yes, of course. Dude, we couldn't do any of this without you, Matt. Like, just, again, I keep talking about value add to my life, brother. To my life, both of you guys, and obviously Dr. Gene, who's hopefully going to join us eventually too. But I couldn't do any of this without you, my man, because you bring such value to me as a person, let alone football knowledge, podcasting, all that. It's great to have you, Matt, and thanks for joining us as part of this 4,000 celebration.
Well, first of all, congratulations. I mean, you know, quite a feat for you guys to be on the air this long and to be as enduring, as popular as you have become. And the growth that you've had over the years in terms of the audience and just the respect level that you guys have earned, you know, has just been fantastic. So it's absolutely been a privilege to be able to be a part of that on a weekly basis during the season. So, you know, and obviously much love to both of you guys. It's been a fun time to be able to, you know, just kind of do what we do, which is just friends talking football, but being able to do it at a level that people want to listen to.
Right.
Yeah, man, I would give you a hug, man. Give you a nice big long hug. Wow, it's great. I want to say again, as I've been saying, Matt, this whole process makes me very uncomfortable. Praise makes me uncomfortable. Compliments makes me uncomfortable, and I just want to turn the spotlight back on other people. So it's good that all these people are showing up. Like one of the things that I would say is like I've always felt like when I grow up, maybe I'll do work like Matt Waldman's work. Maybe like I could strive or aspire to that for many reasons. And you know how I feel about your work, and you know how I feel about you as a person. But I want to ask you while we're out here broadcasting. One of the things that I've always really loved about all the different levels that you work on is that you don't care what people think of what you say. You just don't care. And it makes what you say have so much integrity and resonate so much more. How did you just become the person that would be willing to be honest and not fear any reaction from the world?
Now I feel like I definitely need to be on a couch, but oh God. I mean, I think part of it is I probably was always that way. Like, when you're in Little League and you win the game and they take you to the Dairy Queen and everyone's like, we're getting peanut butter parfaits. Everyone get a peanut butter parfait. And I'm like, I want a root beer float, I mean, it was just like, I didn't even think about, that. But I think the real honest answer is that I do care what people think, but at the same time, I care more about trying to do what I think is the right thing ultimately long term. And so, if I'm wrong with that, fine, but to me, it's all part of the journey. Like the journey is sometimes what we think what the right or wrong answer isn't about one player. It might be about how you approach that position for the next 5 to 10 years. So I try and think about things long term, I guess. But yeah, I mean, we all have insecurities and we all think about that. I guess it's just that early on, I've just my fantasy career and my football career has always coincided with, as I've learned, I've had a knack for seeing outliers that maybe some other people haven't. So I was like, well, that worked. So let's just keep doing that because, I'm not going to veer away from my course. So I think that's probably where that's happened. But, you guys are, I mean, I laugh because, I mean, you guys have been an inspiration to me for sure. I mean, it was a thrill for the first time to be able to be on your show. I read Football Guys since like the mid 90s. And I had coworkers in fantasy leagues I was in with who were like, you've got to, they were writing for KFFL's Newswire in my league. And they were like, oh, but you got to check out this Football Guys site. It's fantastic. And I remember thinking, I'd love to be able to write for those guys one day. So it was an absolute thrill when you guys had me on the show. I still remember that I didn't have good reception. And I literally had to stand in a closet in a makeshift garage in my house to be able to sit there and talk about Tony Hunt, the running back out of Penn State with you guys. And I remember thinking, please may the reception stay good on this, because I don't want to be the slappy who like gets on the show and then like can't, you guys can't even,
we were thinking the same thing on the flip side with Skype, because Skype, when we used to do this show, it was over Skype and it was a Buck and Bronco. So when we'd have on guests, we were just like, please God, let Skype stay put where it was. And well, I guess it worked out for both of us, Matt. So much so now that you have started your own podcast, like, and you've had your own podcast for a long while now, but like, just how did podcasting kind of change, and all the work that you do with Mark, and just everything that you bring out for the rookie scouting portfolio, and how your presence on YouTube, your clips on Instagram, like all these sorts of things, like it's been so liberating because you've really taken that podcasting and then just ran with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got, being on the air with you guys was very helpful. I think that I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't had the experience of doing what we did on Thursday nights. And I used to be mortified by the idea of one of you guys dropping out and I'd have to like be at the helm of the show, because I was like, I'm gonna like screw this pooch pretty badly, you know. And there are a couple times it happened, but then after, you know, you realize it's like, well, the world didn't end, so let's, you know, you'll figure this out, and it gets easier over time. But this, you know, the Audible was really much a training ground for me to be able to do my own thing, and then, you know, being able to do just be a, you know, and part of it too is that you guys had a very open kind of approach to kind of an open room in terms of how we did things. So I could be the goof off that I enjoy being with my friends, and like, you know, and troll you guys visually while you're talking and try and make you guys laugh, which you guys have always been very supportive of, and sometimes take the show off the rails a little bit and realize, well, hell, if I can post pictures of Alfred E. Newman in the middle of the show, then I'm sure I can figure out how to do video. So let's start looking at video and figuring out ways to do that. So, you know, really every step of the way, you know, working with you guys, I learned a lot from working with you guys, and it gave me the confidence to just try other things.
Speaking of trying other things, this is like, I'm just going to turn this into like a pure promo, because that's just what I feel like doing right now. Because I had this picture, because you've talked about, and I notice we're always noticing what's going on in the background of all of our scenes, but the background of Matt Waldman is always the most interesting one to try to zoom in on and see what's going on there.
Right.
It's already today. Exactly.
Up?
Already today, someone's like, "What's on the chalkboard back there?" You know, you're creating mystery and allure, maybe without even realizing it. But you actually have created mystery and allure with the idea that there really is going to be the RSP film room, like a true physical, down in this plane of the physical universe RSP film room. And I feel like, you know, Back to the Future, like, where we're going, we won't need roads. Like, it's going to be a spaceship that just like takes off, right, when it's built. But so RSP film room update.
Well, you know, we're probably a couple of years away from that, but the progress is being made, because of course the person who's going to make the RSP film room is my wife, who I've absolutely I've absolutely outkicked my coverage, as you could say, on a major front. So she's working on the downstairs right now. Once those things get taken care of, and we can kind of make some other plans as that goes, and I'll probably have a full basement that will be a film room area, as well as probably have a guest area for people. So when the summer comes, that, you know, I can do some projects with folks, and we can spend the week, you know, talking ball and taping things and going from there. The other part is learning some new software, and, you know, graphic software. I've gotten a chance to have, you know, a great group of guys help me out with some graphic software this year with some of the NFL stuff that I've done, and I'll probably be learning that this year. So that's going on from there, and so yeah, it's still a little bit of ways away, but for you know, that's going to be a lot of fun when that happens. But right now, I mean, obviously, just having this you know, chalkboard in the back is helpful to be able to plan projects and keep notes, and, you know, and try and make the product that I do at the RSP better overall. And then, you know, it also makes room for me to be able to pursue other things that I enjoy.
He is the incredible Matt Waldman, ladies and gentlemen. Matt, we couldn't do it without you, man. Thanks for joining us to celebrate 4,000 episodes.
It's an absolute honor, and congratulations to the both of you. You guys deserve all the praise you can get.
There he is, Matt Waldman, ladies and gentlemen, from one Matt to another. But this time it's Matthew Berry joining us now here on the Audible's 4,000th episode. Matthew, good day. Safe driving out there.
Thank you very much. I apologize. I wanted to be in a studio, but my schedule is such. I had a call that just ended at 12:30. I'm doing another podcast at 1:30, and my wife needs to take our car in for service. So I'm just like, well, I'm doing this thing. She's like, well, you got to follow me. I can't. So, like, I live in a small town. There's not a lot of Ubers. And I'm just like, all right, well, whatever. 4,000 episodes. They've probably seen it all. So I'll call in while I'm driving. I'm driving safe, though. I appreciate it. I just wanted to pop on real quick. You know, Cecil and Sigmund, we're friends in real life. We're friends online. I've never done the show before, but I thought, you know, you've done 3,999 of these things. Might as well make it here for big 4K.
Matthew, welcome. Thank you. In some ways, I feel like we're on our little surfboards, and you and some other giants made this wave that we get to surf. When did you know this was going to turn into like an industry or a sector, or this phenomenon that we're all part of?
I think it was 2 days ago when you DM'd me asking me to be. Wow.
Perfect answer.
It's a great question, and I think there's a lot of different ways to answer it. It sort of depends on. God, this is a bad answer. But the truth is like there's one specific moment where I thought, oh, wait, we're onto something. But overall, like, I don't know, I ever imagined, like, I don't think I ever imagined that people would be playing fantasy football for $1 million. That people would play for, $1 million in a weekend, right? That you would ever have, insanely famous celebrities playing fantasy football and talking about it, that it would ever be mentioned during a presidential debate, which it was, in 2016. Like, there's so many things where you're it's sort of mind-blowing to me. But in terms of, to answer your question specifically, in 2008, I had been with ESPN for 1 year, and we had a draft event. We had an August event at, like, Brother Jimmy's which is a barbecue place in New York City. And, it was just going to be like, hey, we're going to just, answer some questions. Like, it was like me and Eric Carabell, and I think Fania was there. And so we go to this place, and, they advertise it a little bit, but not a lot. Fantasy really wasn't on TV at that point. And so they got me a driver, and I'm pulling up to this place, and all of a sudden I see lines around the corner, all the way down the street, and a line around the corner. And I literally say to my driver, I'm like, is Springsteen in town? What's going on? What's the event? And the guy looks at me and he goes, well, they're all lined up for Brother Jimmy's. I assume they're here to see you. And I'm like, wait, what? And the fact that, like, in the August sweltering heat, there was like 500 people waiting outside in line to hear us talk about fake football. Me and Carabell, Stefania, and, I'm sure we had an ex-NFL player there too. I think Wayne Corbett showed up. Like, you know what I mean? But, like, that was when I was just like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, because I had never, before coming to ESPN, I'd never really done an event, right? I'd been like FSTA conferences and stuff that are very, for your listeners, are very business to business. But I had never done a public-facing event, and so you just have no idea. Like, you'd get emails and stuff, but, like, I don't know. That was just a mind-blowing event to me, where I was just like, "Oh, this might be more popular than I think it is." If that makes any sense.
Fantastic, Matthew Berry, ladies and gentlemen, the Godfather, the King of podcasting, whatever you want to say. An all-around great guy, Matthew. We certainly appreciate your time. We will get you on the show in an official capacity in the very, very near future. And just thank you for everything you do, man. Thanks for being a great friend, guide, influence, and just your mannerisms and the love of fantasy football, the love of football, and just being a good person, man. We appreciate you. And thank you very much for joining us to celebrate the 4,000th episode of the Audible.
Guys, absolute pleasure. You guys know that I'm a huge fan of Football Guys and the work that all of you guys do there. It's been an honor to have you guys be part of RotoPass. And I'm personally fond of both of you guys. I think you guys do great work. And sincere congratulations on continuing to further the conversation in an intelligent, kind, and fun way here on the Audible and online as well. Congratulations, you guys, on 3,999 amazing episodes of Audible. I think we can all agree. This one's a clunker, but the first 3,999, I think, were a big hit. So
and there we have him. Matthew Berry, ladies and gentlemen. We've never had someone join from their car, Bloom.
No.
That is a first.
Yeah.
That is a first. And thank you to Matthew Berry for joining the program. A first for the Audible.
Yeah. And, probably the reason it took until 4,000 was just because he's that big. I mean, Matthew Berry does an incredible service for all of us, Cecil. Incredible service for all of us. And he's the big, the figure that everyone throws their tomatoes at, Matthew Berry has to deal with an intense amount of just random hatred, right?
Right.
And he's ascended to this level, and I think it embodies something that's been a theme here, Cecil. And we've talked about this a little bit earlier. Like I like to say fantasy football was the children's table. I always like to say, reminded of how when we first had real NFL beat writers on, like Frank Schwab, we would not say fantasy football.
Right.
We would not mention that there's a fantasy angle to something we were asking a beat writer, because that just seemed, petty or too insignificant or trivial compared to football and how intense football is. And like Matthew described the all these steps along the way, the journey of like, no, fantasy football is merging. And in fact, fantasy football, and I can't wait to have Matthew on. He's going to come on, soon again, and just ask him why is fantasy football tapped into this thing? It's like a place that we'd rather be in our minds and like out in the world often. Fantasy, right? Hence the word fantasy. And it has become not only not the children's table, but something that is acknowledged as a major driver of interest in the game and the way we engage and what holds our interest. And he's been like Mel Gibson in Braveheart, like out in front, like we can storm all these worlds. Right. Because like it was beautiful for him to describe that moment. For him, he was like, "What? How's there a line of people here? That's for you." Like, what? And since then, he's been handling it so gracefully as he did that wonderful appearance.
Yes, wonderful appearance, and the hits keep on coming because now we get to talk to dear friend of the show, Charlie Campbell from WalterFootball.com. Charlie, appreciate you joining us. Thanks for being part of our celebration of 4,000 episodes, man.
Oh man, I'm so honored to be a part of it, and congratulations to you guys, you're legends, and just have done such an amazing job and really are such an asset to our football community. So I'm so honored to be part of it today.
Well, and Charlie, I got to ask you just about the medium and podcasting and everything that you guys do at Walter Football. And, obviously very deep diving into the draft world, into the football world and everything that you guys do. And now, how podcasting has become its own universe, if you will. So let's talk about that change because, when you and I met and have been covering football, a podcast was like, oh, you have one of those, you know what I mean? And now it's become so huge and so big out there in the football world. It's really just a big part of what we all do now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really astounding just to see the change really over the past 12 years because you've had the growth of podcasts, the social media growth as well in terms of opening up a whole new world to other sites and guys getting started and developing followings as far as covering teams and not even necessarily, guys that are going to team facilities every day either, but are just smart fans who love football and write about it. So I just think it's so great. I mean, it was sad to kind of see some of the devastation that happened to sports media with the newspaper industry and losing some really excellent reporters over the years to that, and even ESPN having cutbacks and losing some people that were great to follow in terms of covering the NFL. But I'm really happy that more people are getting access and are getting a voice to the league, because I think the league needs to listen to the fans more than it does. So I think the more people are putting out their own podcasts and doing that, it's just a great thing for the sport.
Charlie, you've always been Tampa based, right?
Yep.
So let's bring it back to actual football for a second. You're like the football singularity right now. Tampa in a Tampa hosted. They aren't going to fire the cannon, which I get that. I mean, I guess I get that. I could see the debate in that, but just how coronavirus has kind of taken the edge off of things emotionally, but how like on a personal level, or just your relationship with the game of football and how much Tampa is wrapped up in that. How is it in anticipating this moment?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's kind of bittersweet. I mean, it's great I'm really happy for Bucs fans because they've been pretty long suffering. I mean, this year they had the second longest streak to the Browns in the NFL of missing out on the playoffs. So both franchises break it this year. I love seeing that. I love to see the fans who've suffered long time get to enjoy a playoff team. So I'm happy for the Bucs fans that they're not only to get in the playoffs, but then make a run through the postseason and 3 road games. And now you're back in Tampa, first kind of home Super Bowl ever in NFL history. But it's, bitter in that so many limited seating and fans couldn't go to games and, just not getting the normal access to the team and enjoying that Super Bowl run week after week at the home stadium and seeing the wins pile up. And then but it's always great having the Super Bowl here. I still talk to people. The hotels are still doing pretty well, all things considered. So I'm happy for the local economy. And I hope the NFL gives Tampa a break in terms of bringing the Super Bowl back a little earlier than kind of just like it did with Las Vegas and the draft. When they lost the draft last April,
Right.
They had an open year and Vegas is getting it soon. So hopefully they consider that for Tampa with the Super Bowl here. I know they have the next few planned out, but when they have another year open, hopefully Tampa gets one sooner rather than later.
He is Charlie Campbell. You follow him at Draft Campbell. And Charlie, super quick, and appreciate your time. And thank you again for joining us, the Audible's 4,000th episode. But I have to know, man, what's it like when you saw your work from WalterFootball.com on Howie Roseman's War Room? Like when they shot that ESPN camera shot, it's like we're inside the Eagles War Room. And there's your work up on the wall of what the Eagles are doing during the draft. Like, we've all had cool moments, you know what I mean? Like, we've all had cool Peter King sliding into your DMs or whatever. None of us have ever had that, brother, but you did.
Man, it was awesome. It was just such a cool feeling, and, just such a cool feeling and honoring, and so honored, but really humbling as well as far as, teams looking at it. And I say all the time that to fans, teams – I don't care about my opinion on a prospect. It doesn't matter. What matters is where NFL teams value guys. And what I strive to do is get as much inside information as I can to just project accurately what the teams are going to do, because that's what I value from the fan perspective. I want to give the fans that kind of information. So it was just good affirmation as far as they look at our mocks not because they care what we think of a player, but because they want to gauge where guys are going to go. And so for them to look at us to consider that as to help in their thought process was just such a cool feeling and an honor. And but I'm really honored to be part of your guys' 4,000th episode, and congratulations, man. Love to you guys both, and just wish that we were doing this in person here in Tampa. Right. Rather, but we got to make up for it when we get to episode 4,500 or 5,000. So
yeah, we'll be toasting some cold pops pretty soon, Charlie, in person. Yeah. Can't wait to get back to those days, and appreciate all of your insights and just appreciate your friendship, man. And again, we thank you for joining our show. We're on 4,000, man. Thanks, Charlie. We'll talk soon.
Take care, guys. So honored. Thank you.
There we have him. Charlie Campbell, ladies and gentlemen, WalterFootball.com. C. Bloom, can I tell on you a little bit?
Oh, go ahead. Tell on that. Yeah.
you
ahead.
seemed a little bit nervous when I was like, and then we're going to get this and get this and get this and get this, right? As far as our guests, and you're like booking and lineups. And what did I tell you? What did I say?
Light and sweet.
Light and sweet, baby. Light and
yeah.
sweet. So the hits just keep on coming, and we're rolling through all of these great people and that great positive spirit, right? You see it in Charlie's face. You hear it in the voice of Matthew Berry. You see it with Matt Waldman, like just that positive spirit that the community embodies, like our chat room, man. That's why it's great to go through and talk to all these great people.
Yeah, it is. It really is. One of the things that I keep getting from this cease is like now we kind of have to do this as old men, right? Like we have to do this like right up to the point, or beyond the point, maybe whenever like our relatives are like is dementia or something, forgetting things, because it's you feel the people saying like, hey, it's great that you're doing this, keep doing it. I hear that from people, keep doing it, and it's a wonderful positivity from everybody, and it's fun too. And having Charlie on reminded me of the draft scene, because that's another thing. Like we had anchors in fantasy football and draft analysis when we started out, and I think draft analysis was our first handshake. I mean, fantasy football was how we met through Football Guys, but draft analysis was what we geeked out on. Draft analysis was like, oh my God, you're another person that cares as much about this trivial stuff as me. Well, this is wonderful. Like let's just blah 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 blah. Like you actually care about this as much as I do.
Right.
And it was a small group, and where fantasy football has really taken off and become this industry. The draft is still. I mean, Daniel Jeremiah's name comes up. I mean, we could talk about Mel Kiper or whoever. The draft has its little corner, but it's not that much bigger than it was when we started, honestly, at least in the major mass media. Like the draft hasn't taken off. I still have my grand idea of how the draft can be covered as a season of a sport and could get people interested. It's a little more cerebral or intellectual. So it's just that sense of enthusiasm about something, and that enthusiasm that we spread around. It's great to be part of it. We're really lucky, Cease, because I think it took like originally truly your spark to say, let's just record this. Let's just do this again and record it. Of positivity, you're putting something out in the world. But what has come back and what continues to come back is so good. And it's fun to take this moment out. Like we said, celebrate and appreciate and contemplate and all those sorts of things. Everything that we do on this show is possible because of footballguys.com and because of one guy. Joe's been on the show before. Joe is a fan favorite, of course, and usually it's because we say, sorry, Joe. But we're not sorry now, buddy. 4,000 episodes in, and owner of footballguys.com, Joe Bryant, joins us right now. Joe, first off, just thank you, because it was our Vegas celebration. I had gotten hired by Football Guys in 2005 and talking about radio, and I'm in the Clark's press box and blah, 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 like all these sorts of things that I did. And I worked for like 2 years to get hired by Football Guys. So
that's a whole nother episode.
That is another episode. So like that Vegas trip, you and David were like, okay, we're starting like a radio show thing. Cecil, you handle it. And I was like, sure, I totally can do this. Not knowing anything about how to do anything like this other than talk, right? And maybe record my voice on a cassette, like the first episode of the Audible was recorded on a cassette. But just that idea of podcasting, like there's so much to get to with you, Joe. But first I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity that you've created for Sigmund and I over all these years. But where did that come from? That idea of like, I want to do this, I think we call it like online radio or I don't even know. Like, what does that vision come from, let alone the vision you've had in creating Football Guys?
Well, congratulations, guys, first of all, and thank y'all. I mean, you're the ones that need to be thanked here. But we did it all together, and this is so. I felt like my job in this was I rolled out a playpen for you guys, and then you guys just went to work and crushed it. That's unbelievable. It's been that long, and that honestly slipped up on me when you were saying 4,000. It just flew by, and that's so fun. But I think what I was thinking, guys, was what we all were thinking. I mean, it was the internet. It was the whole thing of football guys. We just figured it out of breaking down barriers. I mean, it used to be, I was in college in 1988 and I got the 2 a.m. DJ slot for Texas A&M radio, TAMU college radio,
Nice.
and was thrilled to have it. I was the envy of my friends that I could lug a milk crate full of my own albums across campus and be on the radio at 2 a.m. Well, now, so in those days you didn't know somebody. You had to do that. You had to, if you wanted to be published, you had to have some in at a magazine or whatever. And we saw when we started Football Guys that no, this is it's the democratization of talent. If you're good, Matt Waldman doesn't have to have, an uncle that's a scout that gets him, on this. Matt Waldman can make content, and if it's good, it gets out there. And Cecil Lammey and Sigmund Bloom and all these other folks, if it's good, it got out there. So we saw that happening with, the website. We saw Football Guys taking off, and to me, it just made total sense. I mean, in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, we didn't even know the word. I don't know if podcast existed back then. When you pitched this on to me,
No,
but it was it was basically the equivalent. Podcast to your radio station to me was the same thing as Football Guys to Sports Illustrated. It was like, hey, we're just going to do it. We're going to make it ourselves. It virtually costs nothing to get started or a little bit to get started. There's no barrier. And, and then of course now today, the good news is that it doesn't cost anything to start and a zillion people are doing it. The bad news is it doesn't cost anything to start and a zillion people are doing it. So you have to fight and claw and do that. Musicians have the exact same issue, but it really is. I just love it that the talent, you guys rise to the top, and congratulations. That's a credit to you guys.
Joe, as I've been saying the whole time, this makes me very uncomfortable. Praise, compliments. So I'm turning it back on everybody. I'm turning it back on everybody. I want to say the name Rob Harling, who I worked at UT, was the first one who told us in our group, which included Mark Felletti, Cecil, about this site, Football Guys. And it was 2000.
I owe him something then.
Yeah, right. It was 2000. It was the forum, really.
Right.
And it was just as soon as you jumped in to the pool, literally the shark pool.
The pool.
Mm-hmm. You felt like, wow, this is a place I want to belong in. This is a place I want to feel accepted in because these people know what they're talking about. It's football, but it wasn't just football. These are people who really value the idea of if I'm going to say something, if I'm putting my name on it or my internet handle, then it's got my name on it and I'm going to stand behind that. And the football chops, it was like I was just talking about with Cecil, like caring too much, people that cared way too much about football and minutiae of football. Right. And the idea of eventually even those people like acknowledging you, Jason Wood, and and you and David and Morrill, and the true OGs. Like if a staff account replied to something you posted in the forum, it was like, wow, Jason Wood said this was really good. But it was always positive, Joe. Right. And I've always pictured you, I was probably the mayor of Football Guys, as like the face of the sun, like looking down on us and smiling on us and saying like, be excellent to each other, like whatever you do, be cool to each other. And it's a big part of the reason, along with the football chops, that it was a place people always wanted to be a part of. And in this moment that it feels like it's more and more present in our lives, this idea of how we don't feel kinship. Mm-hmm. Football and fantasy football continues to be a place because, come on, like on social media, you can look at someone's account and pretty much get an idea of whether they're like on one side or the other side or abstaining or whatever. And yet the level of discourse about football is respectful and positive. It persists despite other things that cause division. Why do you think football is this peaceful? In New Orleans, we have the neutral ground, right? You meet at the neutral ground. Right. How is it that football became our neutral ground?
I think it's bigger than us, Sig. I think that's where I get it from. I mean, it's like, it's pretty neutral on a lot of things. I mean, it's not a a Republican or Democrat bent. It's not a creative or analytical bent. Especially, it's just this weird mismatch and blending of it all. Yeah, I think one of my favorite images was going down the kitchen of the Football Guys staff retreat one time. the morning, like it was early in the morning, and here's a guy in his like Ted Nugent NRA hat talking to another guy who is like, virtually a communist. And I'm thinking, these guys love each other, and they love, and football is that bond, and it's a big enough bond to get past political differences or ideological differences. And so yeah, and I do think our particular flavor, and there's a million ways to do this. Everybody's got an angle and a different flavor. Ours has always been that, like you said, the Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other. We're gonna have a forum where you're gonna be cool to each other, and if your thing is zingers and mic drops and shredding people, well, we're not probably for you. And there's plenty of places that may be for you. And obviously there's huge businesses built on stuff like that. And that's great. It's just different than what we do. So, and it wasn't really, I don't know that I ever thought about it as being like, this is our flavor as much as it is, this is just how we are. And it seemed like we kind of attracted like-minded people who, were into that same thing. And it just is almost a self-fulfilling thing. You put that out in the world, and people that want to hang around that gather, and that's kind of what we did.
Joe Bryant, owner of footballguys.com. Joe, the Sorry Joe Audible meme. I don't know what did you call it, Bloom? Like it's an audible saying. It's an
in joke, or it's it's just a handshake. Everyone wants to feel like they're part of a club, and when you understand these things, you're part of the club. When you understand, and again, Joe, this is again the picture of the sun smiling down on us, but you're always with us. It's a sense that like every show, every minute that goes by, there's that benevolent presence, and if it's like crossing yourself, you're like, okay, I may have crossed the line there, please forgive me, and we all cross the line sometimes, and that's it. So that's it.
That's it. And Joe, what did you think? I guess when Sorry Joe happened, I've told this story before, but it's worth revisiting on our 4000th episode. There was one time early on, you probably got a ton of emails about me because I was probably a little more boisterous than I am now. And I remember I made fun of Cleveland, and you sent me an email, and you're like, "Hey, buddy, don't make fun of where people live." And I think that was one of the first Sorry Joes that was on the show. I hate to admit this on the air, but there was one episode where an F-bomb slipped through. And as I was driving to work, I had to turn around, drive back, and take it down.
Oh my gosh.
But there might be a few people that heard it. But just the Sorry Joe and how that's hit. Now everyone loves Sorry Joe. They probably tell you Sorry Joe a lot. What did you think of that?
I thought that to me was that's when I knew that we were together on it. I mean, because the last thing I'd ever want this to be is church lady wagging their finger kind of thing, and that we were able to take it and turn it into something that's funny and fun like that. I mean, the guy that our doctor friend that won the back-to-back EFPC championships, he's in it. I mean, that's our next T-shirt, I think. But so yes, I thought that was kind of a turning point when it was like, okay, because I'm wondering, and I know that maybe not normal on that, and that so I wonder, like, are these guys going to think I'm church lady or Ned Flanders on them, and want to have a clean, because for a lot of people that's the main appeal of a podcast, that it's not no FCC rules or whatever, and when you guys took it 100% in stride and then turned it into something fun, that's when I knew we had something. That's why I said, this is going to work. I knew it was going to go from there. So that was kind of a turning point. I think it's fun. So my kids do it to me sometimes too. So
it's good. I think I love what it represents. I mean, it's just a sense, like a conscience in some way, but like with a smile. So many things I could ask, or so many roads we could go down here at this moment, Joe. I guess, I almost want to ask you something like what I asked Chris, because you've worked closely with Cecil and I for so long. And it's funny too, while Cecil was we were talking about the first Sorry Joe. Like, I think my mind goes back. See, I think there was an episode that you were shirtless once.
Yep.
You know, I
Yes,
mean,
there
there's lots of
was.
things. There's so many things that have happened. Sorry, just a quick side tangent there, because you know all the images flash by
Yes, it all comes back to
at
me now.
4,000. You know, but what's something about like the show or Cecil or I? Because Cecil said, by the way, this is Cecil's fault that I'm asking you this question, because he's like, this show's going to be about us. So now I'm going to turn around and
Oh, it has to
so
be.
what's something that you would say is like an impression you've gotten of Cecil or I or our show or this broadcast personality we have, which is really just our personalities, that maybe we wouldn't see because you know you're seeing it from a different perspective.
That's a great question, Sig. And I mean, in a way, you two guys somewhat represent what I'm talking about spectrums and bringing in different type. You know, you got the cowboy and the fish guy. You know, I mean, that's not obvious. That's not normally, you know,
Right.
And the fact that I remember thinking, because I knew both of you pretty well, like individually, and then when you guys were saying you two were going to do this, and I was thinking, you know, how will that work? How that fit, and how you know, how will it be? And I think 4,000 episodes later, I think we have a pretty good answer there. But I think you were that picture, and I just remember. I mean, I think with Cecil, you know, Cecil had me. I mean, we should go back and publish those sometimes, Cecil. But the letters he wrote were basically how to get a job in this industry. Cecil is the man at that. He had me convinced basically that the Broncos and Chiefs, I guess, what was it with Hunt? I mean,
it's sitting in the Hunt's owner's box.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I got the impression that Mr. Hunt couldn't make a decision unless he checked with Cecil first, you know? And I remember telling the guys, I said, this guy's either going to be fantastic or he's a complete psychopath, one of the two. And turned out that we were fantastic. And then Sig, on yours, I just remember. I mean, we've got a collection of people. I mean, I think our staffers are some of the most unique, you know, awesome people I know. That I was explaining Sigmund, I think, to my wife, and I'm saying, well, he's attorney first, and he's Austin, and then he's doing this with fish, and then he decided to, you know, not be an attorney and pursue his lifelong passion with football guys. I mean, with football, and it turned into football guys, and here we are. And then the fact you two guys could make this work in such a beautiful friendship, that I think that's the other thing. It's super obvious. It's obvious you two love each other. I mean, it's like that comes through. You can't throw that kind of chemistry or fake that kind of chemistry. That works. And I think that's been, if there's a secret sauce to the show, I think it's probably that is your two relationship. And then the other big thing, both of you have this idea that I'm totally bought into as well, of like, let's carry folks along with us. This is not about, you know, Cecil and Sig. This is about you two guys being the guide. I mean, as we talk about a lot at football guys, I mean, we're the guide. They're the hero. I mean, these guys listening are the you know, the heroes of the story. We're just like pointing them maybe in towards the right way we think they ought to go. And that's always been the beauty of radio, right? Or this kind of medium. I mean,
Right.
Mike Greenberg, you know, talks about it when he was a scared kid moving to college at Northwestern from wherever he grew up, that Harry Carey was his first friend in Chicago. And it was like, it was a comforting, you know, this kind of thing. And I think you guys are that for a ton of people. And that's beautiful. I mean, I love that. I mean, especially in this day and age where we need more of that than ever. I think that's been the secret sauce of this, you know, of why you guys have been so successful at this.
It's the connection. That's what it is.
Right.
And I've told you in person, Joe, and obviously I don't mind saying it over there, we need more Joe Bryants.
Well,
and I look up
you
to
guys
you as a man, and just like, I want to be more like Joe Bryant. Like, how can I get to that level? Because that level is awesome. And Joe, we certainly appreciate everything you've done for us, allowing us to do this show since 2006. It's incredible. It's awesome. We couldn't have done it without you. And thanks very much for joining us here as we celebrate the 4,000th episode of The Audible.
Celebration. Congratulations, fellas. Thank you.
And there we have him. Joe Bryant, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing but love, Sig. Nothing but love.
Nothing but love.
Mhm.
Is really. You know what I have in my Cecil, I have this little notepad thing up, and I'm just constantly taking notes of things that are striking me as we're talking to
Okay.
people. You know.
Okay.
You know what the first note is?
What's the first note?
Kenny and Dolly.
That's the first note.
That's the first note, right? And Joe said it, and it's good. And I mean, we can be. It's like you tell the story about the first time I picked you up at the airport, and I hugged you, and I didn't know. It's like a Seinfeld episode or something. Like I didn't know if you were like a male hugging another male guy or whatever, and I didn't realize the significance of that for you at the time.
Right.
But for me, it was just me. But there is this idea, and I've touched on this a lot in the history of this during the course of the show, the 4,000 episodes, that it is one of the things about football and fantasy football and watching a game, right? I mean, that's the thing, right? Like two dudes that would never hug another man if they thought someone's like watching them or something like that,
Right,
because they'd be
right.
worried that what would people think about them.
Until
If
Brett Favre scores a touchdown.
Right, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, just jump up and down and yay and hug
Right.
and jump and it's a safe. It's it's safe. It's okay. It's okay for a man, a heterosexual man, to express affection to another man and love. Use the word love. That we often say to each other, "I love you," and it's uplifting because it's that sense of acceptance. And again, I want to say the love we get from the audience, like it's received. It's really this tremendous thing that podcasts have ushered in, because it is so personal, and it does allow, like, again, the internet always existed. The internet existed before this thing that we're on right now existed. We're all connected. Cease, we've talked about this stuff. Cease, this is where we really should go. We're going to have a lot of guests and stuff, so we're not going to get there today. But just into, like, talking about the things that people don't talk about in, like, polite public conversation, because
Right.
people might look at you a little funny. Yeah, that's what's great about living in New Orleans. You can talk about spirits. You can talk about ghosts. You can talk about all those things, and not only is it not strange, like everybody is kind of indoctrinated into the idea that this world is one layer of a larger projection that we're part of, but this is just one plane of it that we're part of, and the way that we can send each other these feelings is part of that interdimensionality of our existences, even though we're intersecting on this plane. And it's just wonderful, the acceptance. And I love the idea that, like, we accept each other. Again, starting off that thing of just being loving to what do we really have in common, Cecil? We love to hear the sound of our own voice, and we love football. I mean, that's where it starts, right?
Right.
Like, you like talking about football and listening to people talk about football. I like talking about football. What's that, like Homer Simpson and Gerald Ford, right? You like
Right.
nachos and football? We can be friends. And it's that acceptance, and like that acceptance from the audience. It's happening on these layers at the same time and passing in between. And as we turn the page from Joe, I do just want to say this. I'll say two things. Okay. Number one, the connection we have with Joe obviously is strong, and Joe's influence on everything is strong. And something he touched on, and something I think that we all want to be part of, right? I'm afraid that when you look out at the world right now, you may see people prospering and you feel like they're doing the wrong thing. That can apply in a lot of different ways, right? And yet, the world we want to live in, Cease, right, is a world where doing the right thing pays. Matt Waldman talked about this, right? Just doing the right thing, doing the right thing. And the idea of, like, we uplift people on Audible, like we want to call out good work. In the end, it's actually good for you to acknowledge there's other people out there that do the same thing you do. It doesn't have to be competition. It can just make people say, like what I said about football guys at the beginning, these people know what they're talking about. If you can convince people of that you know what you're talking about, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. You have that credibility. And I hope that, we can all continue to try to be part of a world where doing the right thing also pays. It does in time. It just, you may not understand the mechanism, or it's not the same thing. It's just cravenly going for the thing and just trying to grab it and take it. It guides you there in other ways. And I know Joe said the thing before. It's great. Like, Cecil's either, like, really got this thing, but the tiger by the tail, is that what they say?
Yeah.
Or he's a psycho. And I still say it could be. It could be both.
It depends on the day.
but I really think, I hope that it may not come through in the show because the show is effortless, or it feels effortless because we're in a nice, comfortable space while we're in the show. But the existence of the show and the endurance of the show and what the show represents as an accomplishment is like the catalyst is your determination. And your determination, I think that there's a lot of people out there who may not, you just see the residue of it. But that's it, man. I mean, you were this is all said with love. It's just the phrase that pops into my head, like the beast of burden that first like pulled, like got the sled moving. So now we look at how far we've gone. So you're the spark, man.
We're both the spark, and the audience is the spark, man, because we talk to each other on the phone. Like the podcast started because of a phone call, because you and I are Steelers fans, and in the Shark Pool, the old message board on Football Guys, which is still going strong. Like, it's interesting, like as you grow older and stuff like that. And I haven't been in the Shark Pool in years. But the message board was such a big deal, right? And like message board cred, having a number in 3 digits, right? Like having a 3-digit number, or remembering the old Yeller message board. Mm-hmm. The longtime Football Guys are going to remember that, when our message board was just like blinding yellow. But the old Yeller message board to now, and you and I met in the Shark Pool. And I think your username was just Bloom, right?
Bloom.
Yeah.
Bloom, yeah.
And mine was what, Rebel 34 or something like that. And so we were going back and forth about Amos Zaraway, right? And going back and forth about the Steelers. And from reading your stuff, because message board cred, it was such a big deal. Like, and people may think that sounds stupid because it does, but like back in the day, message board cred mattered. And I remember, like, every time I'd read your stuff, I was like, this guy's smart, this guy knows football. We disagreed on Amos Zaraway, we disagreed on Willie Parker, because we had talked about how Amos Zaraway in the past and all that, and as someone who's sitting on a stack of Amos Zaraway rookie cards and aren't worth anything, but anyway. So when I was hired in 2005 and I worked for a year just writing, basically. And I remember, God bless Clayton. And if Clayton wants to come on, he certainly has carte blanche to do that. But I remember, like, when I got hired, I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And he's like, well, you're the one that got hired. Just do what you're going to do. And you got hired in 2006. And when you got hired, I called you to congratulate you. I'm not sure how, probably a private message. You sent me your number or something like that. Like, I'm not exactly sure. But I called you. I remember talking to you like we were teenagers, right? And just going back and forth, blah, 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 3 hours later. And I said, that's the show. Let's do this, but let's record it and let's make it the show. And that's how that started, was just from a phone call and a simple, like, love and respect of your message board cred here on the Audible. That's how it all started.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that we can go back that long and already, because it seems like, man, it's just so hard to remember the world before we had this other layer of existence that we're all part of. But it's good, man, because I think, again, it was that idea that we both geeked out so much on all this minutia. Like really, that's one of those things, right? Cease. Like, at some point in the show, I'll have like a nervous breakdown. I'm gonna say, we've all wasted our lives. Why are we doing fantasy football? There's a real world and real life out there. But actually, the connection and the therapeutic value of the relationships that we created are that's it. That's actually the reason. So it's terrific. And we're only halfway home, or barely. So I'm really looking forward to this time. And again, I just want to say again, for everybody out there, there's something. I know there's something that you haven't celebrated in your life yet that you should have, that you've put off celebrating. We don't take time to do it. I will celebrate all of these people because, like you said, the crowd's the spark. Everybody out there is the spark. At this point, we're just riding. We're crowd surfing.
Just riding the wave, baby. That's all we're doing. But from that first phone call to then, we did the first episode of the Audible 3 times. So I'm not going to blame something, Bloom, but I'm going to blame something, because in the first episode, And I could probably pull it up and play it for everybody, but actually I could just drop a link in the chat room because it's still out there in the ether. But in the very first episode, I said, welcome back.
Right.
To a show that didn't exist. But the reason why I did that is because we'd done the show 3 times, because we'd got it wrong. Because I had the speakerphone laying next to the old cassette recorder that I actually used in college to, record professors so I could fall asleep or not pay attention. And so I'd set the speakerphone next to the cassette recorder. And because it was too close, there was like interference, right? So then we did it again, and I think I pulled it a little bit further away, but then something happened else. And so we had to do it a 3rd time. And on the 3rd time, I got the speakerphone just the right distance away from the cassette recorder so there wouldn't be any interference, and we got it done. So I will always and forever blame me saying welcome back on the very first show due to that. I don't know if that holds up, Bloom, but that's what I'll say.
What holds up? Well, I'll tell you what holds up is that Ron Burgundy, right? Anchorman, Stay Classy. I know you got taken on to Stay Frosty. I still stay. I dance around in some way, but always get back to Stay Classy. It's embedded somewhere in there.
You're the classiest, right?
Yeah, something to do with being classy, right? But it's a nod to Anchorman and Ron Burgundy, the early 2000s, the great golden age of R-rated comedies, right? And the thing about Anchorman is Anchorman, I think, was a movie that all of us got kind of swept up in part because it did seem like they were having a lot of fun. Maybe it was like some of, like Austin was saying, that performative art of being right on the edge in those characters, and Will Ferrell, of course, like leading the way, and they were playing broadcaster, right? And I always felt like it was emblematic for us because, again, that thing comes back to like when we were kids, like pretending we were on the radio or pretending we were calling a game, and that's like Ron Burgundy.
Right.
So
Right.
It's like we don't take ourselves too seriously, There's a little wink, and we're always pretending. So just coming in with welcome back,
Right.
It's a wink, and it's wonderful to have everyone wink back at us and want to be in this place with us.
Yeah, and at least we did that over the phone because our Skype years were because this was early Skype. And again, we're going to sound super old, but we've been doing this since 2006, baby. So that's what's going to happen. But like the Skype days were so nerve-wracking, dude. So nerve-wracking. And do you remember our first beat writer? God rest his soul, Tom Killer Kowalski.
Tom Killer Kowalski, yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was your idea. So I'll ask you, Bloom, as I interview you.
Sure.
What in the hell gave you the idea to reach out to actual beat reporters? I mean, because Tom Kowalski, you're talking top tier level beat writer for a team. And, he gladly joined. And kind of one of the audible isms, because you often say like, well, just do it, right? But like, it doesn't hurt to ask. My whole life's philosophy, and I don't know exactly how I got to this point. I wish I would have got to the point a little bit sooner in my life. But when I just learned, like, you can get a lot just by asking, just by being polite, just by asking. And what's the answer? Going to be no. You know what I mean? It's like when I asked Andy Lindahl if I could be on to talk fantasy football with Mark Schlereth, and I sent the email, and I remember telling Stacy, like, what's he going to take away my birthday? I'm not talking, and this is the phrase I used, which is ironic. I'm not talking to Peyton Manning tomorrow. So if they tell me, no, you can't come on the radio, well, it doesn't change anything for me. I still have to go to work. I still have to go work at the machine shop. It didn't change anything. Like, just ask. And you asked Tom Kowalski, like, to come on a show, and this was early Audible. Mm-hmm. Maybe our 2nd or 3rd year, maybe. Mm-hmm. And he said yes, he was glad. And that opened the door then, because we could say, well, we got Tom Kowalski on this last week. We'd like to have you on, Mike Reese, to talk about the Patriots and the gold that he gave us. But like, what was that impetus for you? Yeah. And again, we kind of had to hide that it was a fantasy show.
Right. I think that when I go back to that time, I'm almost sure it was 2007. And I had gone off. That's when I quit my job at UP. There's the Jeff Wilson story. Some of you out there know that story. That kind of gave me the kick in the ass. Sorry, Joe. To try. Mark Felletti, who may hopefully can get on today. He's another one that I remember. He said when the Shrine Game was in San Antonio, and I was like, "Look, the Shrine Game's in San Antonio." That was 2006. That was before I was even on Football Guy staff. He said, "You're going to apply to cover that practicing game, or you're not really serious. Like, you're full of it when you say that you're going to try to do this football thing." And I said, "Well, I guess I have to do it, don't I?" And then I went on the All-Star Game tour, including John Murphy. Still see John Murphy and Rick Sertella out there.
Yeah, they're
Draft
still
Bible.
doing their thing, man.
I know,
doing
it's
the
great.
podcast with
It's
Russ
great.
now, and
It's
it was
great.
Greg Jennings was at that game. Mark
Yep.
Spolston was at that
Yep.
game.
Yep.
I wasn't there.
Yeah,
that was you guys went to that game before I went there.
right. Tavares Jackson. So, Cease, I remember going out to those All-Star games, and this was the great frontier before internet media really became a great presence in football the way it is now. Like, I loved how Schottey was talking about, like, they lit up, like, I was the first blogger. That's what's funny too, Cease, for us old men, old people out there experiencing this. Remembering all these different iterations of technology, like you said, having to say the prayers, to light the incense for Skype, the Skype gods, to please let us finish this 15-minute phone call so we can release it as a show, please.
Right.
Because the technology was not as reliable. But I remember going out to these games and it felt like, wow, like this is just really open. Like no one tells you, they don't publish it anywhere, that if you just go and you say, I'm here to cover this, I'm here to do some good work about this thing that you all are doing, that they will open the door for you and let you in. But you have to come in the spirit of doing the work,
Right.
And I think it really just electrified and emboldened me to say, well, then we can, it's the door's open, which I think is, again, what you say that for everybody else, you have to ask. Cecil Lammey is always quoted in our household when we're trying to impart lessons to the 8-year-old boy that lives here. And and you have to ask, because the answer is no if you don't ask. So what do you lose if you ask? And for everybody out there, I think that there's more. I know there's that quote about, like, Matt Waldman's emails used to sign off with it, like, we're not afraid of that we're powerless. We're afraid that we have more power than we could ever realize.
Right.
And,
just ask, and just ask,
yeah.
like you did on the Beat Reporter tour. And one of the first ones, and I met this guy first on the Tatum Bell show. It's when Brandon had first moved to Denver. And I don't know if you remember that, BK, joining us now. Your mic's on mute, buddy, so make sure to unmute that mic. But Brandon Krisztal, now I got you. There you go. BK, what's up, dude? And you were one of the first Broncos. Of course, you're a Broncos insider for KOA, and you're my neighbor here in Roxborough. But, like, you were one of the first guys that came on our show as kind of a beat writer tour, of course, covering the Broncos back in the day.
Yeah, and it's funny, too, because my coverage of the Broncos has kind of ebbed and flowed depending on what job I was doing. I was always in the locker room from the time I got here, but, sometimes more as a producer. And because I wasn't the one chasing and breaking news, I ended up finding out a lot more info, and I think building trust with guys, that when I finally got this job full time, it made it a lot easier when this was officially my beat. I didn't have 5 other jobs. Now I have one other job officially, is the morning anchor, doing sports updates, thankfully from my house here, as opposed to having to get up super early. But yeah, it was fun talking to you guys then, and exciting. I mean, did you tell me it's show number 4,000? And I guess I see that written right above me. 4,000 episodes. I've done a bunch of different podcasts and a lot of radio shows, but I don't think they all add up to 4,000. So hats off to you guys.
Oh, Brandon, it's been a while.
It has.
So that Cecil had me doing some work on the Broncos beat back in the day when I had more freedom to travel. But
you
I
guys
guess
might have been in Dallas together too. Right?
I'm sure.
Yeah,
that was
when the Broncos were practicing against Dallas. I think BK was
at Valley
too.
Ranch.
No, I was not there. I was not there for that. I don't remember why. I just didn't go. I wanted to, but I wasn't there. I know. I feel like I definitely bumped into you when you were out here though at one point.
At training camp for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, but again, congrats, 4,000 episodes. And you guys have fancy white mics, which I've never.
Yeah, that's Cecil. That's Cecil.
Yeah,
professionalism. The microphone. I should have never doubted Cecil, because when you have the microphone, it makes you take on. Again, it's Ron Burgundy, right? Like I've got to have an air of some grandioseness to my speech if I'm speaking into a microphone like this. But Brandon, I'm remembering going back to, like, the last time I saw you, making it last. What's like because we're not just making it last, but this world's kind to us and has embraced us. But what's like been the outboard engine for you that keeps you engaged and continuing to be excited about being part of this world?
Well, so it's a couple things. I think at the baseline, I love talking about sports, and I would be doing that anyway, right? I think we all
exactly.
We all would. That's how we would spend our time. So even if we just had a regular 9 to 5, whatever that was, we would probably fill our extra time looking at our fantasy football teams or daily fantasy or fantasy hoops, fantasy baseball, fantasy hockey, whatever. And then doing the same thing that I have plenty of friends that do. And the texts that I get throughout the day, especially from friends who are Broncos fans, are, hey, what's going on here? Oh, I saw this. Or what can you tell me about this? My favorite is when I have somebody, specifically my friend in LA, will see something that maybe Mike Gliss had or another reporter had. I go, yeah, I also had that actually first this time. Like, why you didn't notice that I had it for the handful of times that it happens. I don't want to make it sound like I'm beating Mike to the punch all the time, but I'm getting there a roundabout way. So at the very baseline, I love talking about sports. Secondly, I married well, and I married someone who makes a lot more money than me. I'm certainly not crying poor over here, but she just does. And we know plenty of people in this business that make a lot of money. Guys on TV, guys with prime radio slots that have 1 million ads, right? There's and gals. There's plenty of people that do make money, a lot of money in this business. But so I married well, and not only did I marry well, she understands what my passions are and supports everything that I need to do work-wise. She knows that as I was watching Senior Bowl practice last week, and I know that Cecil, you were down there sick. I'm not sure if you were there or not. She knows I really wanted to be there. We've got a 3-month-old. Work wasn't sending me, even though a couple of my coworkers did go. So I wasn't going to pay out of my own pocket to potentially, contract coronavirus and pass along to the 3-month-old. And even more so this week. Now, I know Super Bowl week's muted, but she knows that this is my favorite week of the year, is normally being at the Super Bowl, like it is for so many of us in this business. So those things right there. And then back to not just loving sports, loving the stories that always develop. And Cecil and I could tell you, Sig, going into this, we didn't think John Elway was going to step down or move along, however you want to characterize it. That made what was going to be a offseason all about the quarterback way more interesting off the top. And now you've got all the quarterback stuff, but the stories always change. And I'm always focused on what's going on the field. Like what's going on with Von Miller right now, it's aggravating that I have to call the Parker Police public information officer like I did a couple of days ago just to kind of check in on stuff. That's never been the reason that I do this. I like seeing, okay, we're going to see a good game. What led us to that good game? Or why didn't it go the way a certain team wanted? To me, it's always about what's going on the field. The behind-the-scenes stuff, how guys carry themselves. Look, we all do stupid things. They just happen to make a lot more money, and at times you're like, why would you do something that dumb? But to me, it's about you never know what you're going to see on a given Sunday or a given night with a game if you're watching hoops or baseball or whatever, maybe you're football on a different night than it is Sunday. So that's what keeps me going is that I love sports that much, and I'm lucky enough that we get to talk about it.
It's in his handle at BK Denver Sports. And BK, again, one of the first reporters, beat writers, insiders that we got on the Audible years and years ago. I want you to talk about just kind of this medium, right? Because, and my final question for you, BK, I appreciate your time as always, brother. And it's good to see you. We will be seeing each other because I could walk to your house in 5 minutes. But we will be seeing each other soon and toasting, maybe playing some more trivia. But I just want you to talk about this medium because you know it well. You know the sports radio industry well, and how podcasting went from like, what the hell's that, to now everybody has a podcast, and radio is so now vested in like, make sure to listen to our podcast, that's just the way the industry has gone. How has it changed over the years? And we've been doing this since 2006. We used to not even really tell people it was a podcast, just be like, it's our online radio show.
Right.
Now everybody knows what a podcast is.
Yeah, and everybody has one. And that's kind of interesting in and of itself. So I don't want to go too long because I know you guys are bouncing a bunch of different places. But you guys were even ahead of me on the podcast thing, and I wish that I would have put one together sooner, right? You see some of the old school, really successful ones like you guys, like what Bill Simmons has done. And I'll use an example, though. When I was in between gigs, so I'd left the Fan. I had gone to New York for 11 weeks. I call it my internship to run CBS Sports Radio's weekend programming. Came back to Denver, and was kind of filling in at the fan and just kind of piecing stuff together. Well, I was also doing stuff with what was then BSN Denver, which is now the DNVR Sports Network or whatever Brandon Spano calls it. And as he was trying to build it all out and have reporters that covered every team, I was like, dude, you got to get these podcasts going. And I was simply looking at Bill Simmons' example, not just the meteoric rise of podcasts, or the steady rise, I should say, but Bill Simmons, who had left ESPN at that point, was starting The Ringer. And the very first thing that he was doing was establishing the podcast network before he worried about filling in all the writers for the people that want to read 3,000 and 5,000 words. So you knew where this was going. And if you ask Brandon Spano now, as much as they have a bunch of cool stuff going on with the bar and everything else and the t-shirts, they still make way more money with their podcast network. And I stupidly needed cash at the time. I probably should have taken a percentage, but I had a couple of podcasts that I liked that I did back then. I did one called Peel the Onion, where I sat down with it was fun because I got to sit down with Chauncey Billups and Todd Helton and a bunch of Broncos players. Aqib Talib is the one that never saw the light of day. I talked to him last week and reminded him we did the best podcast ever, where we went incident by incident by incident, fights at the rookie symposium with a teammate, and the issues in Dallas with the gun and his family and all that. And he's like, "Oh man, that was so crazy." But literally at the very end of it, he goes, "The best way to not get in trouble is don't put yourself in a bad situation." And no lie, either 2 days later or 9 days later, he shot himself in the leg. And he goes, "Look, just because I said that didn't mean that I always followed my own advice." Now, this was all off. So it's the best podcast that never saw the light of day. What podcasts remind me of now, and it's exciting when I keep seeing people I like make podcasts. And for a lot of times, it's more entertainment people than athletes, because we cover athletes. So when Russell Wilson has a podcast, I listen to it for a minute. And I'm like, Russ, you're just kind of being yourself. Maybe a little hyped up, but you're not taking me behind the scenes. Aqib Talib is a different story. That guy opened things up, and if you watch what he did with the no-fly zone the other day, that trip inside the locker room, that's going to be different, and that's going to be worth listening to. What Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson are doing with all the smoke, there's a reason that has traction. But Alec Baldwin's podcast I like, or Rob Lowe's podcast, because they're kind of taking us behind the scenes of these celebs that are opening themselves up a little bit, or Mark Maron's podcast, and he's obviously one of the first. Joe Rogan obviously does it to a great level. But I'm saying all that to say there's a million podcasts out there, just like you can't watch every TV show that you hear about. Hey, you got to check this out on Netflix. Hey, check this out. It's like that with podcasts. I keep subscribing, and if I'm lucky, I get to a tenth of the podcasts I subscribe to in a given week. So I think the other part of it too, before I get out of your way and let you guys talk to more interesting people, is there's a managed expectation with the podcast. If I sit down and I say, "Oh, this week I know that the Audible that Cecil and Sig are talking to so-and-so. Oh, and I see it's the 40-minute mark. Great, because I want his insight." Or I know that it's a minute or an hour and 20 minutes. So maybe I'll split it up over 3 jogs, or my trip to the store and then back, or taking my kid to school and back. When you listen to live radio, and we certainly love live radio, you don't know when that guest is exactly going to be on. Hey, Cecil's doing the show. He and Nick are going to have Brandon Marshall, the wide receiver, on. You don't know when, or Champ Bailey on. You have an idea, but you have to keep checking back. Oh, and if you missed it, great that you can now go back and listen to it. If I sit down and I just see the podcast, Cecil and Nick had Champ Bailey on, and it's at the 24-minute mark. Not that I don't want to hear them talk about Deshaun Watson, but I really want to hear what Champ Bailey up to. Right. So manage expectations. Like whenever you take the subway in New York, it took forever, but when they finally put times up, I can wait 11 minutes because I'm going to go grab a hot dog real quick and a soda, and then I'll be back down here and have plenty of time. Versus when I first moved to New York, you're just kind of leaning over the track. Like, do you see the light? It doesn't make you get there any faster. So everything about podcasting, and now the video element's interesting because there's some data out there that'll tell you it's fun for us to do, and Zoom has made it really cool, and all this technology that's out there. And you guys are obviously using StreamYard, but people still like just listening on their phone or their mobile device, or in the car or at the gym. So this is an extra added feature, and it's fun to see inside. Charles Barkley does his podcast, and you can see his little office at his house. Right. But I think ultimately it's an auditory medium, and so I'm excited about where it's come, and disappointed, like I am with a lot of things. I didn't figure out a better way to invest in it.
I can see your Golden Tee machine in the background, which I need to come over and play sometime.
I got that, and I got a little mini NBA Jam that's got NBA Jam, NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and NBA Hang Time. So it's a little smaller cabinet than the full size Golden Tee, but it plays just like the old one did when we were kids in the early and mid 90s.
Well, we appreciated you for coming on the show years ago as our Broncos insider and reporter, and we appreciate you now, BK. We'll see you soon, brother. Always great talking to you.
Thanks, guys. Sid, good to see you and catch up with you again. And I appreciate what y'all do. Footballguys.com helped me win a couple championships, sneak into some playoffs, and it always is a big help in the football season or when I'm filling out DFS lineups as well. So thanks again. Continued success, and I'll be on again at the 8,000th episode.
There we have him. Yeah. He's Brandon Krisztal, ladies and gentlemen, at BK Denver Sports. Supporting podcasts, producing podcasts, doing your own podcast describes our next gentleman and a dear, dear friend. I always think of The Hangover when I think of Jeff Hasley. Jeff, how's it going, man? And you've been such a podcast supporter from day one of this show, but also doing things on your own, doing radio spots around the country, like just this whole medium for you as one of our Football Guys staff members and a longtime staff member. In fact, it's been so long, Jeff, I can't even remember your username on the Shark Pool.
Wheelhouse, right?
Wheelhouse. Yes. And the tidbits that you would grab and still grab to this day made you stand out from the crowd. You've always been a big supporter of us in this show. You've been on this show. Thanks for joining us and being part of this celebration of 4,000, man.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. That's a lot of nice things you said about me there, so I appreciate it. This is all about you guys. You guys got a little bit of a little mini marathon here. Are you glad you didn't do 40 hours?
Well, we did a 12-hour marathon for charity. You remember that, Bloom?
I do.
12-hour marathon. Some of it was pre-recorded, so we could just hit record and go. Right. But we've done this a little bit before. It's only 4 hours today, and I'll be doing 3 hours tonight, Jeff, so I'm probably going to be wiped when it comes to like 10 p.m. Mountain Time. But the podcast medium, why has that always been so important to you?
Well, to me, I think it's just a way of listening to people, getting their opinions on things. So it's always good in fantasy to surround yourself with smart, knowledgeable people. And you can pretty much pick and choose who you listen to based on the podcast that you decide to listen to. So when you guys have an audience that you do and the audience that you've grown and developed over time, I mean, that says a lot about you as just knowledgeable people who have, a lot of insight to the game that they want to provide and share. And to me, that's what I look for in a podcast, because you can really kind of pick and choose and handpick who you listen to. And your audience definitely tells you a little bit about that aspect of who you are, how you are, and how other people perceive.
Yes, I love that Cecil brought up, Jeff, your message board handle, Wheelhouse, because you'll always be Wheelhouse to me. No, what I mean by that is, like Joe brought up earlier, that our Football Guys staff are all special individuals, like one of a kind people, right? And I think that we're old, but we've adapted to technology. We're still here. Like, we figured out how to have our camera and our microphone and everything work, right? But you understood it with your Wheelhouse persona how to give value to people. Like, why would I pay attention to something just because I see Wheelhouse? Oh, well, now I'm going to pay attention to everything I see that it says Wheelhouse. And you just understood how to, like, establish a presence and provide value in someone's life. And I'm just curious, Jeff, how that reflects you as a person. Like, where did that come from? This idea of, I'm going to show people something. It's almost like, Jeff, you were a little ahead of the analytics curve in the sense of, I can make data interesting. So where did Wheelhouse come from?
I don't know. I think I just started compiling data and stats and stuff like that. And it started off small, and then it kind of grew a little bit of an audience as people were interested in that kind of thing. And I liked it myself. So if I liked it, I figured other people might as well, right? So yeah. I mean, if I'm looking at a stat thinking, okay, this, and that, and I kind of pull these stats and compile them together to come up with a really interesting tidbit or information or something that would be helpful or useful to people. If I like that, I imagine others would too. So it just kind of stemmed from there. And then when Twitter happened in 2009 is when I logged into Twitter for the first time. When Twitter happened, it was all of a sudden like a new place to kind of, I don't want to say like a canvas for an artist, but I mean, it was an opportunity to just kind of get myself out there, kind of show what I like to do as far as these, compiling stats and interesting, neat tidbits of information. And it just kind of grew from there. And, I still do it. It's not something that I do all the time. I have, an article that I write, for Football Guys weekly. And every time I a couple times of the year, I'll throw in some interesting, neat stats and tidbits and things like that. But, I don't know. It just kind of grew, and the same thing with the whole Wheelhouse persona too. That grew, and boy, we're going back into like the early 2000s with
that's where this all came from.
Yeah, that's where this was born. And I was saying earlier, Jeff, like, remember when message board cred was like a thing? Like, oh my God, or if you're a triple digiter or something, or you could remember Old Yeller, like that was that, and kind of just getting to know each other, because that's how we got to know each other before we actually met. Or before even we really worked for Football Guys, is most of us started in the message board and just loved talking about football.
That's right. Yeah, and then everyone kind of grew with their own personalities, and we associated ourselves with these different personalities. And when we met for the first time, probably in 2007, I think, that's when I came on board on staff in Vegas. And how many Vegas trips have we had, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what I think of The Hangover when I think of you. One, because you and Jeff Pasquino pulled me out of a pool when I probably shouldn't have been sitting in a swimming pool. And then I watched The Hangover for the first time. And you loved it so much that you were that guy. Like, that everyone's like, don't be that guy. And you were that guy because you're like, wait, this part. This part, this part, because it was like so new and so fresh. So every time like The Hangover will be on, you're flicking through channels or whatever, I always think of Jeff Hasley, man, because that's when I got to experience that movie, was watching it with you in Vegas.
Yeah, that's true. We did. And it's funny that you remember that, but I don't necessarily recall all of that, but I'm sure I did. I'm sure it was like that.
Say it was there.
But that's funny that I'm a memory that you have. I can think of countless memories that I have of you. I most recently remember the Eric Dickerson autograph.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
From Vegas. So it seems like whenever I didn't know that was like one of your favorite players. It just
one of the favorite players of all time, man.
So anyway, yeah, lots of stories. We could have a whole episode on stories, but. I appreciate you bringing me on. It's an honor to come on and be a part of this. You've had some very big names and some key people in our industry say congrats, and I just want to do the same. And I'm honored to be able to do that.
Well, Jeff, we appreciate you. We appreciate your support through the years. Such a big friend, such a big supporter of the show, and just appreciate everything you do for Football Guys, man. We will talk soon. And thanks for joining us on the Audible's 4,000th show.
You got it. Congrats, Cecil. Congrats, Sigmund.
And there we have him. Jeff Hasley, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I should have asked him about Carolina. They're moving on from Teddy, aren't they?
Right.
Moving on from Teddy.
Right.
And I knew we weren't going to talk much football on this show, but there's still some, we can drop some in there, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's still like, there's never a moment in the calendar that's not fascinating or exciting, that there's not something to ponder that's fascinating or exciting in football, right? I mean, that's another thing I think that has brought all of us together on this show, and it is how we got to 4,000. See, there's a whole thing that we can talk about this, right? Like 4,000, like maybe to someone we need like an intervention, you know what I mean? Like, come on, 4,000 shows. But it's because, like Frank talked about the preseason watch list, there's always something that we're thinking about, talking about, something that we're pondering, and it's the passage of time that marks, there's always something on the NFL calendar that's pulling you towards it, right? After the Super Bowl, there's the combine or the whole draft season unfolding, and then, of course, the culmination of the draft itself. And then there's OTAs and the dribs and drabs of news that give us little hints at what might be coming for teams that have had changes or teams that want to change but still have the same personnel, same coaches, then the preseason training camp and so on, and it just keeps revolving, right? It's like the Earth, right? The Earth never stops.
Right.
It keeps revolving. The calendar of the NFL. There's so many other sports where it feels like there's a long dead time, and there's never really a dead time. So we experience that time together. And it's another one of those things, Cease, that I always like to say, don't encourage us. Well, people have been incredible about encouraging us. There's never a time that people said that's too obscure, or you guys want to talk too much about players that probably aren't even going to play. Like, why are you bothering talking about them at all? People have been very open. And again, what's another common theme coming up in this show, Cease? I geeked out on something. You geek out on that thing too. Let's hang out and geek out together.
Right. And I thought Hasley was very insightful when he said, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
And I thought other people would find it interesting as well. And that's such a guide for all of us, dude. And no matter your walk of life, like, this is interesting to me. I'm sure there's other people like me. Let's go talk to them.
Yeah, man. Wonder, right? I mean, really and truly, if there's a gift or if there's something that, I think of like Charles Bukowski. Someone mentioned Bukowski in the chat room already. If you notice, Cease, that because of the post-truth world, when you quote somebody, you're never really quite sure if they're the one. Like when you give them credit for the quote, like you look it up on the internet, like actually, Thomas Jefferson never said that, or Anyway, but the quote is, if you feel like you're losing your soul, then at least you still have a soul left to lose. And wonder, and having a sense of wonder and awe in the world is something I think that is a sign that your soul is still very much intact and working. And how can you not be in awe of football, right? I mean, they're laying it on the line, the players. Come on. They're laying it on the line, like really, in a way that it is truly a spectacle, but it is also at its heart a human a drama and a great epic story of humanity. And it feels very lucky that because we share that wonder and awe, we're able to do this. I'm in awe of that.
Yeah, and Zach wants an extended Broncos rant.
Yeah.
Supplemented with tequila.
Who said earlier? Like sometimes I think it was Chris. Who's like sometimes Cecil speaks his mind. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the frustration sets in, Bloom. The frustration of like, this is how you're going to run an NFL team. That's how you're going to do it. Okay. At least it's not the Texans or the Rockies. My God. Like, seriously. Mm-hmm. There's your baseball reference, Bloom, from me.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
An actual baseball reference. That's what happens when you trade away arguably one of the best players in MLB history in Nolan Arenado. So there you go, Rockies.
Wow. Yeah, I know. That's rough. There's your like Texans kind of moment in baseball.
Right. And we've had plenty of those moments over the years. I enjoy going over people's comments because we've tweeted this out a few times, Bloom, about, hey, send us some of your favorite memories. And the favorite memories about like Matt Waldman getting our goat in terms of just bringing up the Ravens or making us walk off the show. Do you remember that Thursday night show? I think we were on Google Hangouts or something like that. Yeah. And it was Ravens and Steelers on Thursday Night Football. I think I had done my show and then I stayed in the studio. For some reason, I just remember being it was the ESPN Denver studios. And you and I got so mad that we walked off the show. And Matt was he was like a pig in slop, man. He was just so happy. And that's one of the favorite memories as I'm going through people's memories of the show. That's one of the best episodes out there. I don't know exactly how to dig it up, but if you could, oh my God, that was one of those incredible audible moments. I have the drop of you saying like, do you remember the time that Cecil got drunk on the air?
Yeah.
Well, this time, do you remember the time that you and I walked off the show because of the Steelers?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? I always talk about being a neurotic Steelers fan. I mean, that was Joe brought up Fish, going to see Fish. One of the things about Fish was, at the height of it especially, like you just never knew what was going to happen. You would go to a show and you never knew what was going to happen. And sometimes there were things that were references to shows that had happened at that venue before. So now we're in like the multiple layer of like, if you were here the last time we were here, we did this. Now we're going to do something that references that. And when we talk about being neurotic Steelers fans, in some ways that's always just a reference back to that game. Yes. Because because the Ravens had no business winning that game. And there was a point that Mike Tomlin did what Mike Tomlin does when he manages wins, occasionally a win that turns into a loss. And we knew what was going to happen. We're like, okay, well, now we're on this track. And improbable play after play that would bring the Ravens back in and allow the Steelers to squander multiple chances to win the game. We were expecting it, right? For everybody who wasn't watching that game with the Steelers' neurotic brain, they were like, "Whoa, this is shocking! What a turn! Who could have seen this coming?" And we're like,
Right.
"How could anything but this have happened?" You aren't surprised when this happened. You're surprised when this doesn't happen. And now anybody who was there with us that night understands it, because I think what we did was just very cathartic for everybody in that sense of your relationship with your team, and how sometimes there's like a emotional trauma or a scar, but when you latch onto your team, it's an emotional thing that is like, this is where I go on a rant about, speaking of rantsies, like, true fandom is like unconditional, right? True love is unconditional love, right? Unconditional. And this makes us all the more insufferable, those seats, because we've had the Super Bowls and things like that. So I get it why
Right.
people hate neurotic Steelers fans, but yes, I'm here to confess I am one.
Yes, we are one, and that's the way it happened, and that's what we're doing. It is the Audible's 4,000th episode. I'm trying to upload that video from a very, very special guest right now, Bloom, so I will get to that eventually. I did also want to share Chris's favorite, Chris Chateau, on Twitter, one of our favorites, by the way. And he says, the first show I ever listened to you guys, we're talking about Tim Tebow's path to fantasy relevance if he became the starter. I thought you guys were goofballs. I ended up winning my league with Tebow, and I've been with y'all ever since. He gives out the rock horns, and he says, hashtag Audible 4000. And that was like, just think of all, like, there's some live shows. Like, I used to do the live show on my personal YouTube channel. So there's a few of those still remaining. Like when Matt put out the picture of the little ginger kid, we were talking about Andy Dalton. I can't remember exactly the context, but we had so much fun. I almost fell out of my chair because Matt was posting this picture of this little ginger kid when we were talking about Andy Dalton. But a lot of those ones that were Google Hangouts that were then put on my channel, not on Football Guys channel, were about Tim Tebow. I mean, and that kind of, fantasy goodness that came from such an awful player in terms of on the field. But again, it just kind of highlights, like, we've seen players come and go, right? I mentioned Greg Jennings or Marcus Colston being at your Shrine game that you first went to in 2006. Those guys are retired. We've seen, and we've been on the air long enough to see a player go from being a rookie to being retired to maybe even being now bound for the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? So when you think of it that way, when we've seen entire arcs of players during the course of the show, that, and not just guys that flame out quick, right? Like Matt Jones, Dr. Roxo, as Frank brought up at the top of the show, like, just when you step back and you think like, oh, I remember the Tebow days. Those were crazy.
Yeah, it was fun too, because it was one of those moments where you could not pick a more illuminating example where football analysis and fantasy football analysis completely diverge, because you can say Tim Tebow is not going to last as an NFL quarterback. Tim Tebow is not going to be a credible NFL quarterback. But if somebody gives Tim Tebow a chance to be an NFL quarterback, he's going to be good for fantasy football. And now, like, that's become this massive story. We had to coax people and convince them of that. But that's what's great, though. But see, what's great is fantasy pulls you in and engages you in the game in a way that you can bring up a name, Cease, and it automatically will reference you back to probably some emotional root of a memory of something having to do with fantasy football, right? That's why you could say Billy Volek, and anyone that plays fantasy football is going to automatically know what you're referencing there.
Yep.
It creates those emotional connections, and it gives you a reference back to things where, like, how easily would you remember like anything that happened from a specific year, but if you played fantasy football that year, you can reference almost everything.
Right. It'll take you back to that time, and you're going to know exactly what it is and exactly what happened there. That's for sure. It is the Audible. It is our 4,000th episode. It is a celebration, and it's a celebration with you. And it's also a celebration that's brought to you by The big game is here. Kansas City versus Tampa Bay. New customers can play free from $1 million with their first deposit thanks to our partnership with DraftKings. Create your DraftKings DFS account and make a deposit. DraftKings will credit your account with a free contest entry. Draft your lineup and compete for the $1 million top prize. Just go to dkng.co/big game. That's dkng.co/big game. Enter now. Offer ends on 2/7 at kickoff. Minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for full terms and conditions. Do you remember when I wanted to do 400 episodes a year? We got close. There was 1 year we had like 385, something like that.
Yeah.
Now we average about 240 episodes per year. And I think back to that and I go, oh my God, like, 400 episodes in a year would have been a haul, Bloom.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. But it's always good. Like when we take a break from the live show and then we come back in March, like it's just so fun again to share that community, share the experience, and just kind of do the show, live in this universe, if you will.
Yeah, we like being here. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's easy to imagine doing this many episodes of the show because we enjoy this space, spending this time together, and it's been really great seeing so many people drop in. Eric Stoner's in the chat room right now. I would love to have had Eric Stoner on. Part of the reason I didn't, Eric, I love that Eric Stoner, if you have been with us for a while in the football world, in the draft world, he's kind of a mythical figure,
Right.
Like at this point, we might be able to say, for people that have just joined us in the last few years, like they may be like, is there really someone named Eric Stoner? Or is this something that's like Andy Kaufman? I can't remember the name of the alter ego they had, where like different people would show up. Tony Clifton, right?
Right.
Different people would show up. Like sometimes it would be Andy Kaufman, sometimes it might not be Andy Kaufman. But he, there is that stimulating level to talk about football that brings in everything, but mostly that you're drawn to the glimmer. You know what I'm talking about, Cease, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can watch a game, there's these moments that kind of sparkle. And it can even be moments that like terrible things happen, but what it reveals is just the intense weight of the story that's unfolding, I mean, that's the crazy thing about football, right? Like we can watch a football game and there'll be a moment when a player is in some sort of horribly physically compromised position and like his teammates are praying around him and he's immobilized and someone has to, and that in most stories is like the peak of the story, right? Like in most stories, that moment of crazy emotional, it's something happening, a transaction that releases all this emotional energy. But in football, that's just another play. Let's turn the page into another one because the story is so intense. And then that's what makes, when you start to understand the context of all the humans in the game, it makes it that much more interesting. And I'm glad for anything we've been able to do to cast more attention to that, to the humanity in football. I think that's another thing that is a shared value of us and our audience.
The shared value with our audience and shared value that continues on as we have this discussion about where we've come from, what's happened along the way. And just, I remember the Skype days being the Bucking Bronco. It seems like there was something else before Zencaster, because we used to use Zencaster and, all of these fine products, whatever. But then switching to YouTube, Bloom, I think that brought a different energy. Switching to YouTube and then just ripping the audio from that and then posting it on iTunes or Spotify or whatever. Like the YouTube energy, I think seeing each other's face and talking to each other and, being able to react or seeing something in the background. Like when we went to YouTube, not necessarily the show changed. And not to say that we got less serious or whatever, but it brings a livelihood. Because if I don't see you, right, let's go back to like the Skype days or something, right? And I would just be listening to your voice and we would be going back and forth. Like those shows were fantastic, of course, but like there's something about being able to see you, see your reaction. That's something that changed when we decided to go to YouTube. Again, as I said, when Austin was on, probably a year or two behind on the YouTube thing. But when we figured out Google Hangouts, like that's when the show went to like even a different level.
Yes. However, what I think has kept it very audible, because I mean, we moved over to video. It was just a natural progression. I don't think it was something we did strategically. I don't think it was something we had a conversation like, we got to get video to go with our audio live streaming. It was just like, well, that's something you can do now. And then we're going to do it. But we still, it's interesting because, so can I make a confession, Cease?
Sure.
Like, I really feel old and out of touch when I find out that there are these YouTube stars that have millions of fans. And they have names that aren't even names. Their names will be word, or like some word or some symbols or things, you know?
Okay.
Usually you find out about it because like someone will die and they'll be like, this person that like they had this massive YouTube following, millions of people. Because I mean, what's good ratings for a television show now? Like 2 or 3 million people watching, you know?
Yeah, it's a lot different than it used to be.
Yeah, and YouTube has, you know, so, but my point is, I think there's a whole generation of YouTube stars that understand how to use the medium, the visual plus audio, probably the visual more than the audio, to like project something, and also let people kind of ride around in their hip pocket like a GoPro or something like that. But I think we have no sense of that at all. I mean, you know, my wife, the love of my life, Kate, you know, she helps me like, you should have some things back there. You know, I might be behind I have a white wall behind me, or, you know, people compose their backgrounds and things, but we still don't know any better than just to be ourselves. And I think that audio has, joined by video, has really just helped convey that sense of, we're not trying to put on any airs or pretenses or anything like that, which I think is what the show's always been about. That we are like, it's just the same way that football guys back in the day especially would basically hire new staffers from the community, like just almost exclusively from the community back then. And like, we are you are us. That's another theme that keeps coming back. And it's, you know, we, you know, again, I think of someone like Eric Stoner, like that. Like, I'm always taken aback that someone like Eric Stoner would spend his precious time, because I know he's got such a live mind, and you know, his presence in the football world, as far as his understanding and, you know, contextual grounding and like the real significance of everything that's happening. Like, wow, if you like to listen to our show, then I feel like we must be doing something good. And along the way, we really just like hanging out and talking about football, and like Brandon said, hearing our own voice.
Hearing your own voice, and well, just just talking, right? At the end of the day, one thing that I've often said, Bloom, you know, and I remember years ago feeling, I don't know, dismayed or something, and I was like, you know, we're not doing anything, you know, like we're not curing cancer, we're not helping people. And I remember you saying distinctly, like, no, wait a second, dude, like, you know, there's people going through things. And since that time, and this was very early on, but since that time, we've had people reach out to us because there's heavy stuff going on, man, like heavy stuff. We get to play in the toy section, right? Mm-hmm. We get to play in the sandbox, all those sorts of things. And, you know, we've had people reach out to us and say, you know, hey, I'm going through chemotherapy and listening to you guys helps get me through. That just, if that doesn't sit you down in your chair, I don't know what will, you know, to you know, help someone in that way, just by, you know, being a moron with the microphone. I'm talking about myself, Bloom. Yeah. You know, just to be able to help those people. So I remember you telling me that and be like, no, dude, we're entertaining to people, all these sorts of things. And then just to hear from our audience, you know, and ourselves going through things. Through our lives, and think about how everything that this show has gone through, and, you know, like everything that we've gone through while doing this show. So what we've gone through on a personal standpoint, you know, to still do this show, you know, to have that steadiness for 15 years and for 4,000 episodes, it's not something that everybody gets. You know, and it's something that I feel blessed to be able to do with you, to always have that, because life changes, things change, you know, and everything, just let's say professionally wise, like I've been on a station that went out of business in ESPN Denver, right? And there was like a month where I was like, I don't know where my next radio home is going to be. I wanted to be back at the Fan, where I've, was for 3-4 years from 2007 to 2010. And then to have that now still be steady and still be here with you, it is a great, great thing. Speaking of great, I want to say this. There's probably no person that's had a greater impact on my career than this guy, Mark Felletti. Now, Mark, I will tell you this with so much love and so much respect for you and your guidance, brother. But I remember doing the pilot episode of the 5-minute drill, and I was, bumbling, stumbling, just being awful. And you came up to me, you put your hands on my shoulders in a non-violent way, and you said, "Just tell me what you know." And you looked at me and you just said, "Just tell me what you know." So I went from like, I've never done TV, green screen, this, and I'm nervous, and we're in Texas, and blah, blah, blah. And you just put your hands on me and you said, "Tell me what you know." And I will say this, that guidance, your coaching for me helped me grow and develop as a talent. Your coaching, which was at sometimes harsh. Your coaching, which was very truthful, very biting, very to the point, because that's who you are. That's how you manage things. That's how you get great products from everything that you do from a video standpoint. And I've never gotten to really thank you publicly or personally, Mark, but I just want to thank you because whatever it was, and again, it's just kind of you. It's just who you are to be tell me what you know, and to really demand the best from me. More people need a Mark Felletti in their life. I'll just say that.
Whew. Well, that is beyond high praise, Cecil, and I won't take any of it. I don't deserve a tenth of that credit for everything you've done since then. I just sort of lucked into the right thing to say at the right moment. But it sure as hell was fun figuring out how to do all of that with you boys.
Yes. Oh, I want to give you a hug, Mark.
Yeah,
Mark
buddy,
Felletti.
it's been a minute.
Yeah, man. Although rarely does more than a few days or a week go by that the name Mark Felletti doesn't go between my lips because of all the wonderful times and the time we spent together. So much time we spent together for a while there. And I guess I was going to ask you, so we'll do this straight up, let's, in my interview, you're asking you a question, but it's funny because as I was telling you earlier today, you're doing a lot of work that I admire and I'm kind of jealous of, working in a way that takes your talents and aligns them with your beliefs and values in the world. But I want to know, how did working with me and Cecil, directing us especially, truly directing us, prepare you for all the people that you rub elbows with now?
Yeah, it's pretty funny to think back to those days because, whatever you were talking about, Cecil, in terms of where you were developing as a talent, I had no real experience directing stuff either. So all of that was the same for me. I got to make all my mistakes on you guys, trying to figure out how to minimize the amount of pain I cause with talent that I work with. While still getting results. And I think the number one thing is that I'm just incredibly grateful that you both had the thickest of skins and the greatest of patience, because it is very hard to, parents, you guys understand these things, you have to learn how to sort of manage those things. And in a weird way, directing is the same way, because you're how I feel about this cannot always be conveyed in the moment. And I wasn't great at figuring that out when I was working with you guys. So that was the number one thing I take away from our time together, is that you let me be a miserable prick sometimes. And I'm so much less of a miserable prick, I think, these days, thanks to you.
No, you're in charge, man. You're running the show. And what we did with the 5-minute drill with Draft Guys TV, you were on the Audible for what, 2-3 seasons, right?
A couple seasons in there, yeah.
A couple seasons of doing the preview shows. I just remember when I used to cuss on the Audible and then I'd go back and fix it in post and just trying to make you guys crack up. That was the main thing. Listen to the back and forth between you and Sig and then trying to make you guys laugh. That was kind of my main purpose when we did the Audible.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that was the goal, because it was so nerve-wracking back then. There was so much. It was hard to make me laugh, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because it was scary as hell to be on that show. And now you guys are so much bigger and everything is, it's you're both blown up in all these incredible ways. It's hard to imagine. Back then it felt huge then. And now to see what you guys have gone on to do is it's heartwarming, man.
Well, I mean, in some ways, I was just recounting earlier on this show, Mark, that you've helped, break the champagne bottle on the yacht with the 2006 Shrine game, I remember the exact place. I can take myself back to all of my senses in that moment by the ATM outside of the main building. And you said, if you're serious about doing something with football, like you always say, then you're going to go cover that game. And I said, well, you have to come with me. And the rest is history. And I did. And that was whenever because UT had just won the national championship. And it was an exciting moment for the whole community. But we were covering the Shrine game in the press box. It was the tight end, Thomas. And I applauded him, and Mark was like, "You're not supposed to applaud in the press box. You're not supposed to actually applaud for players in the press box." I'm like, oh, okay. So always guiding us. I guess, God, I don't even know all these different places I could go, Mark. You see Charlie Strong got hired by Urban Meyer?
That I didn't see that actually.
Yeah.
That it's.
I think of what I think of UT. I was thinking about the UT football and Vince Young.
Well, I remember back when we were at the Senior Bowl, one of the funny things was Ed Orgeron was out there begging for jobs, and obviously to see him go on, it's like
I've said that story because I was telling Kate, the love of my life, about that because he really, and the funny thing is, watch Ed Orgeron, watch it all start to go down in flames now, but he was like the ultimate hero of this Cajun football parable miracle. But we saw him at that lowest point for him. And that's, it was, we were all in awe of all the things we got to see behind the scenes. I guess I'll ask you this, because I always think of end to end, E to E, right? And that you were willing to say, I can take responsibility for this whole thing from end to end at a time that I think it was a very new idea. And now, that seems like the kids coming up, they just come out of the womb ready to do that. Right? So what can we oldsters teach those kids now?
Man, I think that's the question that you guys should be answering, not me. You're right. Everyone is digital native now. We started doing draft guys when YouTube wasn't in HD. Forget advertisements, right? Vimeo had HD, but YouTube didn't. We were way early on that curve. And I think if we'd come along a year later, ironically, things might have changed in a lot of ways for all of us. But I think there's one lesson I've learned, and I think the 5-minute drill was a great experience for that, which is the essential skill, I think, when you're already digital native is not about how you film stuff or the quality of your mic or any of the framing of the shot. It's about how you organize your information, right? Sort of compartmentalizing things for viewers or listeners so that they can retain information is the challenge of podcasting and in many ways of digital video too. Because it's very easy to ramble or move between topics. We've all listened to shows or watched things where people are kind of sliding all over and you're like, wait, how did we slide all over? Remember that? Or you listen to something, you're done, and you don't really remember a lot from it. So if there's a skill that people who already know how to use the tools and are just sort of hyper fluent with social media need, it's that ability to put things in boxes, whether it's visually or audio, so that people can walk away with the takeaways. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So that's, that's the skill I feel is the most important these days.
Mark Felletti, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, brother. We just appreciate your time. I got one more for you because you strike on it there, and I kind of want to build off that and just talk about the realm of podcasting and the experience and the world that you've seen change with podcasting. I know when we started doing cold opens and I told Sigmund, stop meandering at the beginning or on the couch, come in with why Deshaun Watson, it better be with the Dolphins. I'm going to tell you now it's on the couch. And that kind of hook, right? That's a radio thing, but it's also, I think, changed this show because a lot of podcasts would be like, what a great day and beautiful and snowing outside and whatever. And it's we call it in radio GTF. I'll just clean it up for, the show for Joe. Get to business. GTB, get to business. But how have you seen just kind of this world, this universe of podcasting change, going from when we started the show, they weren't even called podcasts, to people don't know what a podcast is, to now everyone has a podcast?
Yeah, the monetization of podcasting is obviously the biggest change on the surface and how that's impacted everyone dove in, to your point, Cecil, with a podcast. And now every newspaper has dozens of them. Every amateur, person, if I want to learn something about the Marvel Universe, there's 2,000 podcasts out there for me to sort through. I will say this for any enterprising listeners, my number one takeaway for podcasting is that it is a decade behind everything else in terms of search tools and really the ability to find what matters. Even the best podcast apps just lag behind everything else because it's all built on this old RSS technology from the 90s, and we don't have to get into all that. But it's a tool where, as much as it's sort of become a dominant media form, it still feels like it's stuck in the like early 2000s in terms of helping me digest the content. So that's the place that's still giving me fits. I'll tell you that.
Well, since I'm curious, I'm really just asking this, Mark, for my own personal curiosity, so I can take some notes. Whose work are you liking right now? Are you consuming out in this world that we all inhabit?
So it's funny. I think I mostly focus on basketball podcasts these days, outside of keeping up with a few people I actually worked with, like you guys. And I guess I would say there's only one other podcast where the host chemistry works for me like you guys, and it's called The Greatest of All Talk. It's a basketball show. Ben Golliver and Andrew Sharp do this show. It's subscription only now, which I think is also interesting because they wound up sort of going to work for different places. But I would say what's interesting from their podcast and from your podcast is that for as much as I talk about information organization or how to sort of do XYZ thing, the number one secret sauce is always chemistry, and it trumps everything else. You can throw everything else in the garbage if the host can really vibe. And so that's kind of what I look for in podcasting these days. I've kind of moved away from the super slick era of Gimlet podcasts or all those kinds of things, because that sheen, or that NPR sheen, has kind of lost its sort of feel for me. It's too easy for everybody to do, and it just sort of sounds rote. So I'm always looking for that chemistry. That's what I'm on the hunt for. So all recommendations are welcome.
Always on the hunt for talent, developing talent, harvesting talent, because he's an amazing talent himself. He is Mark Felletti. Mark, I will tell you this. I love you, brother. I couldn't be myself without your influence on my life. So thank you very much for joining the show. Thanks for being a part of the Audible, such a big part of our lives. 5-minute drill, draft guys. I still can't believe nobody else has done that. Like I said it on the All-Star trip this year. I was in Mobile last week. I can't remember who I was talking to. I said, what we did, no one's ever done again. And you should have continued that. Like somebody should have picked that up. So we were so ahead of our time, and it was such a great project and great times, great learning. Almost in a way, I feel like Boys to Men, you know what I mean? Like we just grew up together in a way in this industry. And again, couldn't do it without you, and appreciate you joining us here for this 4,000 celebration.
Back at you, boys. Love you.
Boom. There we have him. He is Mark Felletti, ladies and gentlemen. That was fun. Man.
Yeah. Well,
that was fun. Going down memory lane with a guy who created us, man, who really molded us and crafted us. Watch those old 5-minute drills, because they're still on YouTube, by the way. Watch those old episodes and then watch us now. I might even drop a link in the chat room.
Yeah.
Like watch those old episodes and see us and judge us as talent, and know how Mark made us better.
Yeah.
As talent.
Yeah. I was petrified to be on camera, though. That's for another On the Couch episode. But everybody's acceptance and love, now we're on camera and it's no big thing. Although we're not doing something that was so. But
if someone dropped you into a green screen studio right now, you could just.
I could probably do it pretty well. I could probably do it pretty well. It's good. And another thing I want to say is, for those of you out there watching, listening now, Mark, too much time passes before when I get to talk to him or catch up with him and things like that, but I think all of us can look back at another time in our life when we did something that we hold dear. It doesn't have to be professional. It could just be something you did for fun, or just it was your neighbor and you would get into whatever, your roommate in college or whatever. And when you look back of the things that make up your life, they're some of the things that make you smile. And reach back out, because like you said, that was good. It felt good. It feels good to get back in touch with people and say, hey, remember that thing we did together? That was great.
That was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool. Because again, positivity and taking time out while life is happening, because we're always so busy making, John Lennon, life is what happens while you're making other plans. We're all so busy doing all these things. And my Lord, living as a 20th century, 21st century American, like so much of what you do is to maintain what you're doing. Like it's like levels removed from like, what was my life even about to begin with? Because I'm doing all these other things, you know, what do they say? Cease, mo money, mo problems, and things like that. Right. You know, so taking a time to like hit the stop button. Again, that's why I think it's so important to celebrate things. Like when you accomplish something, celebrate it. Because if you don't, your life will get behind you and you won't have taken time to, what they say, stop and smell the roses. So we're doing it.
And we celebrate in the presence of greatness with Fantasy Football Hall of Famer David Dodds joining
Hey
us.
guys, how you
Nice
guys
Super
doing?
Bowl hat. David.
Yeah, I
course,
like that.
man alive. It's great to see you. It's great to talk anything with you at all. Just picking your brain about any sort of subject is awesome. Of course, former co-owner of footballguys.com and just allowing Sigmund and I to have this chance in 2006 when you and Joe said, go do a show. And I had no idea how to do this. Just thank you, man, because this show starts because of you. This show starts because of your intuition and your insight and your guidance, really. So as we celebrate this 4,000th episode of the Audible, just want to start with thanks, man.
Yeah, and hey, thank you too. 4,000 episodes. This is so crazy, and it's just awesome. We all remember when fantasy football was nothing, and we're gonna talk about it because hey, we think it's cool to talk about it, and
right.
And you guys have built a giant following, and rightfully so. So it's just outstanding. The 4,000 of anything is pretty crazy.
Right.
4,000 episodes where you're actually talking for a good hour and then editing and adding commercials and adding sound bumps and everything else. That's a huge amount of effort. So it's amazing. It just shows where the industry's gone, and it's fun to watch.
David, I'll give you a hug, David.
I know,
it's good.
exactly.
And in some ways this is aligned because, you know, we're taking time out to celebrate what we've accomplished, which is really something that couldn't have been accomplished without what Football Guys accomplished, which leads directly back to you. And of course, we're retiring from Football Guys, but we want to celebrate you too. And celebrate, like I said, we wouldn't be here having this conversation about this show without you and your work, but your work goes before the 2000 internet boom, right?
Right.
Like
yeah, I was doing fantasy football. There was no real internet. I mean,
right.
There was no internet.
You were like in the jungle with a machete going somewhere where nobody had gone before. And I just want you to, if you could just like give us a story or something you remember from that time, because there's very few people that can say, I went into unclaimed territory, wasn't on the map. We drew the map.
Yeah, it truly was that. I mean, there was no map. I mean, it was funny. It started kind of on news groups, Rec Sports Fantasy, I think is what it was called. But it literally was just, 2,400 baud modems. I mean, you connected, you kind of hope you'd read some things. And it was kind of before even message boards. There was really no internet. Everybody had spotty connections. It was that whole AOL sending out 1 million discs and, Earthlink and all these other funky companies kind of creating what, became the first stages of the internet. And I think I wouldn't say as a joke, but it was like, I mean, just I was in a local league with a bunch of engineers. We were at a company, and we saw that very first fantasy index come out. I think it might have been called Fantasy Index Football or Fantasy Index. I forget exactly what it was called. They slightly changed it. It might have just been Fantasy Football. Then they changed it to Fantasy Index, I guess. We tore out the sheet of papers that were the roll sheets, decided to play, and it was really from that, just trying to win a league that we were in for $20 became really the forefront of kind of the strategy component. I mean, my very first Excel VBD app and so I remember like reading Joe Bryant was on the news group and he was talking about value-based drafting, and I remember it just hitting me and going, this is it. Now, I think the math isn't completely right what he's talking about, but I think what he's talking about, unlike positions, how to evaluate those, how to work with that. And I really think it was just the genesis of some of the very early thoughts on how would you dominate, how would you win your league in this thing. And then, like I said, we saw it from these local leagues just grow up and become something huge.
Yeah, it's becoming part of pop culture, just
Right.
becoming part of society. And now fantasy football, you're the nerd if you don't play fantasy football.
Correct. Yeah, it's so funny now. It's like, and it was funny because we even saw it there, like in this small company, and it was in the government. But it was becoming like the new golf. Instead of everybody going out to play golf, you kind of sit around the water cooler and talk about, come on, man, I'm offering this and I'm throwing this in on the trade. And it was the whole trade and everything. And it was like the new golf. You don't got to get out there and swing a club if you're not good at it, but everybody can play fantasy football. And I think that was really the genesis of really, even from at least my view, of creating Football Guys. Let's recreate that water cooler talk. Let's get all kinds of people that have slightly different takes on the same great game we're watching, whether it be dynasty value, whether it be any aspect of this. Let's just get all those people and let's just keep that water cooler talk. And again, this was really all pre-Twitter, right? I mean, so now all of a sudden you can get that conversation 24/7 on Twitter. But really back in the day, I mean, hell, websites weren't there, and then message boards weren't there, and then they came and grew, and so we've seen this whole thing just explode.
Okay, David, I don't want to make you blush, but you should know that usually when I say your name on the show, I say something like, we throw the word genius around a lot, but David Dodds is a genius, a true genius. And I can remember your FFA threads where you cracked the code on like the dry shipper cycles, and you knew the exact
Right.
time to like buy a stock and let go of a stock. And I always felt like, what's, a beautiful mind, right? Like I could tell that you had a layer of perception as events unfolded in the world that very few people have access to. So I just have to ask you, and there's so many ways we could go with this because there's so much happening, David, right? Like Top
Right.
Shot, like digital collectibles, what?
Right,
Wall
right.
Street bets,
Right,
cryptocurrencies.
Right.
Like, what do you think about all this? Tell me what in the mind of David Dodds as you're processing all this. What is some of your impressions?
Well, I'm on GameStonk, and making a fortune this morning, AMC and GameStonk. It's funny because I think the world is changing. It's changing really, really fast, and we're seeing all of this digital. I do think digital collecting of cards makes sense. I mean, it's instead of buying something and then sending it to another person to have it graded and them getting their cuts and only then trading the highest graded things. Well, a digital collectible would never ungrade, right? I mean, the very definition of it. So the logic of all those things makes sense to me. I mean, we are transforming as we speak when it goes to that stuff. And I think what you're seeing right now in, Wall Street Bets and a few other places that are really talking stocks is somewhat of a decoupling of the hedge funds' control over what we decide is important. I mean, it's the same reason stocks like Tesla and Beyond Meat are crushing it, because the millennials are just saying, those are companies we believe in. This is what we believe. This is the company we want to see succeed. And they're using the stock market to do that. So as the hedge funds all decided that GameStop, retail's dead, they could just digitally stream these. They're saying, dude, I have great memories at GameStop. I like going and trading in my games, and I wouldn't mind buying stuff at GameStop. And same thing with AMC. Like I have great memories of making out in the back seats of the movie theater. I just don't want that to go away. I get that I can have a really good experience in my digital home, but I like the idea of going out and eating expensive popcorn. So what you're seeing is this retail side of the world fight back, especially as these hedge funds take these unbelievable short positions against these stocks. They're just saying, we're going to drive it to zero and we're all going to get rich. And the reality is saying, well, we're just going to buy it and we're just going to hold it with our diamond hands, and you have to buy it back from us because you're short. I mean, the rules of the trade say you have to cover those short positions, and we're just sitting there holding. And so you're seeing a fight back, which I think is just, again, I'm a punk rocker by heart. This stuff just, I'm not saying everybody should throw all their money into these kind of things, but I think these internet meme stocks, some of the stuff, cryptocurrency, it's showing that, like, the house of cards and everything's built on the rich guys don't get to make all the rules. And I think you're seeing a movement worldwide with GameStop, with AMC, a few others in the stock market that's worth noting. Like, if you're not watching this thing is unfolding as probably the biggest story of 2021. and I'm on it. I'm on it for the ride. I mean, and again, most of us have been beaten down our whole lives. But I grew up poor. It's like, dude, if I lose a bunch more money in the stock market because the bad guys won again, who cares? But the movement of what this is behind, of saying, hey, stop rigging everything for the little guy. We want our GameStop. We want to be able to show up and buy a friggin' game. Is that, we're in a pandemic. Can we just not go to a GameStop and buy something and have some fun today? Do you have to take that away from us too? So I think what you're seeing is something even beyond the stock market. And so you're seeing that with everything. You're seeing it with digital currency. You're seeing it with digital collectibles. The millennials are taking charge of the world they want.
David Dodds. I want to live in a world where I can talk to David Dodds on a daily basis. David, we could talk to you all day. Just appreciate your time, man. And again, I mean, we're not here without David Dodds. We don't get to do what we do without David Dodds. So
in football, guys, and what we created and continue to create. I don't even want to use the word past tense. I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is just the talent that's left to continue on that whole journey that is Football Guys and wherever all that goes. But yeah, I mean, I owe everything to you guys. I mean, we just got a whole bunch of people that loved football and just hammered it from every different angle. I mean, who would have known Football Guys, this little goofy icon, little goofy logo, would turn into what it's become? And it's a brand. And it's a brand that just keeps getting more powerful by the day. So it's super exciting to watch. 4,000 episodes. I'll be here to keep watching all those, and amazing what you guys have done. And I owe everything to you guys. So,
well, we appreciate you, David, and hope to chat soon, man. Be good.
Okay, you guys have a great one. Bye.
There we have him, David Dodds, ladies and gentlemen. Royalty, Bloom.
Yeah.
It's royalty.
Well, no, really, like I want to make sure that people understand that David and Bob Harris and Joe Bryant, and it's a short list, that they really created this out of their minds,
right.
Out of the idea of hey, why can't there be a community around this? And again, Cecil, one of the other things I want to say on an occasion like this is that, and again, anyone who can hear my voice or ever listen to us owns a piece of this when I say this, that there's so many times in life that you say, well, I could have done that, or I saw that coming, or that would have been easy, you don't have a lot of chances to say, well, but I actually did it. I actually did take a risk. I actually did jump out of the airplane. We really did build something. And in part, and I say this note a lot, that because we did it before it was obvious or clear that it was something that people cared about, or something that would have relevance or staying power, but we did it because we wanted to, because we like doing it. And that's another thing I think that comes out of this, is when you do work, like Jeff Hasley was saying, like, it's interesting to him. Right. If you do work that you like to do, then that's the spark. That's what gives it a staying power, not some sort of clever promotional marketing idea. Not that stuff doesn't work too. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? I mean, there's those two paths always present to us, and I
always
love
present and always combating with each other. But I'll tell you this: the guy that did it before all of us, and the reason why we have a Thursday night show is because of Andrew Garda. Who joins us right here. Andrew Garda joining us. Audible 4,000. Get the tears, wipe them away. You had, in my first fantasy football writing gig, was at ffadvisor.com. It was misspelled. I think because advisor correctly spelled was taken. So Indeed. Jeff had the site. You had a video show, an audio show. Like, you want to talk about ahead of your time. And like, before any of us did anything, I did a spot. I did like guest spot called The Source. You thought I was nuts, where I just come on and rant. I'd send you guys like a MP3 or whatever. But Andrew, you started the Thursday night show because of something called Block Talk Radio. You got us on that tip. You've been on this show a bunch, and it's just welcome in and good to see you. And thanks for helping us celebrate the 4,000th episode of the Audible.
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, this is an honor to be back on the show with such luminaries as yourselves. I mean, the amazing thing about the staying power of this show is just the consistency, not just like you guys show up every day and do this, and that's important in podcasting. I had to pull out the excuse me, I've been podcasting for 10 years card on a friend of mine the other day when she was like, well, I mean, I could do a show like, I mean, does it matter when it comes out? And I was like, hang on. Let's talk about this.
Right.
But you guys, people always know Sunday after the games, they can go and hear you guys chat. Thursday night, you guys are always there. Season previews, team previews, like all of that stuff, like the consistency, like they know the audience that they know you guys are always there. And that to me is amazing. Like you guys both take time off and yet the show doesn't shut down. Like, yeah, what did we used to say that in a mobile? Can't stop, won't stop. Like
Can't stop, won't stop. Yep.
It's amazing. And to think that like, yeah, like when I first quote unquote met you, you were some insane dude in Denver ranting like, this is Cecil Lammey, the source.
I'm the source.
Me and Jeff Hoffman used to listen to that as we recorded our MP3 show because nobody knew what a podcast was.
Right.
I'm still not totally sure what a podcast is sometimes, but you know, and then we'd react live, and it was phenomenal. And then it's funny because you sort of dropped off the planet briefly, my planet, and all of a sudden, like the Audible crops up, and then you know, you're on the radio, and all of this stuff is happening. And then what happens? But I end up working for you and Sig and Draft Guys TV and like all of that stuff. And I mean, it's full circle. I mean, that it's just. And so to me, it's amazing to see the lasting power. I mean, how many other podcasts, I mean, forget the fantasy football roundtable that I used to do before I hopped on the Football Guys train. Like how many podcasts, small independent podcasts have there been in the business that we do? Like, yeah, I mean, dozens of huge ones, like became huge and they're gone. They're gone. The Audible is still there. And it's because, and I want to just say you guys, because it's Waldman and Doc and like all of the guys who, you know, contribute to this all the time. But I mean, it's impressive. You know, there is no podcast like the Audible. You know, all the big boys, you know, ESPN, CBS, they all jumped on the train and they're successful because they have $1 million marketing arm. And then there's Joe and David who are like, yeah, you know, you know, promote it however you want to promote it because that's how we do things. So yeah, it's super cool. Like when you texted me the other day and like, hey, we're doing the 4,000 episode. I was like, I had two reactions actually. One, holy cow, that is awesome. And two, holy cow, we are freaking old.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking at our pictures here and like I'm seeing, you know, the Sigmund glasses and the gray and my glasses and my gray. And actually, Cecil, you kind of look about the same. That's I don't know.
I got a filter on my camera.
I don't know what's going on here, but you know, let's talk. You know, I'll head out to Colorado. We'll catch whatever it is that you got going on.
Oh, Colorado, we got whatever you want, buddy. So
that's what I hear. New Jersey's heading that way. We'll see.
That's good genes. All right. First of all, Andrew, I want to say thank you for adding on to two of the themes of our show. One is that we're old. That's come a few times. The other is that Cecil Lammey's insane, you know, because in some ways celebrating the Audible, making it to 4,000 episodes is like I was saying earlier, that my ode to Cecil and his determination and his ability to create things. But really, Andrew, what I'm going to ask you about is Cecil OG, man.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. You created one of the more memorable fantasy football seasons I can remember because first of all, you went 12-1, and I think you made it like 10-0 before Cecil beat you, but he beat you without setting his lineup, which is, I don't even know what that means. That's like one of the riddles of the universe. And then you won the championship like over 100 points.
Yeah,
you won by over 100 points in the championship. What was? I mean, did you get like the journal from back to? Tell me what's the secret.
Well, you know, what made me laugh the entire time. And first of all, I am really angry at myself that there was not any trash talking with Cecil. Like I didn't. there's a lot going on in my world right now, so that just kind of slipped away. But I am forever going to be frustrated because although I probably saved myself since I did lose, but it's funny because I remember we were doing we were live broadcasting. And Sig, you'd come to me and you'd be like, "So, Andrew, how is that pick or whatever?" And I'd be like, "I hate this team. This team is not what I want it to be. This team, I don't know."
Which is the opposite. When everyone drafts, they're like, "I got the greatest team ever," and you were the opposite of that.
Yeah, well, and you know what was really the problem with it is that people kept just jumping in front of me and sniping my picks. So I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go tight end this time." And then the tight ends I wanted were gone. And I was, So yeah, I was frustrated, but I mean, I think the key to this season was trying not to chase value. And for those of you who, I mean, everybody knows, anybody who listens or watches the show knows what, the Fessel leagues are. But I think, you can imagine the pressure, even in just a trash talking league, among friends, add that you're among the experts, you're among the best of the best. And I feel like in years past, and I'm pulling my team up right now just to kind of take a look at it here, because it's been a while. I mean, you would think I'd stare at it longingly every single day because
I would.
I was laughing because I was like, I couldn't remember if there was, I was like, is this the year that I'm going to win all my leagues and not win a dime because everything's not money? But so, Fessel helps. But yeah, I feel like this year, rather than react to what Waldman did or what one of you guys did, or and just kind of I just tried to be in the moment as much as I possibly could. And I also spent a lot of time while we were drafting trying to think 2 steps ahead. Not 2 steps ahead of you guys, because that's impossible. And in Cecil's case, that way lies madness. Value can I pick up? What do we got here? Okay, so the wide receiver I wanted is gone. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to try and find value. And honestly, I think that worked pretty well. I mean, we preach it all the time. Look for value. Don't chase value. Look for the best thing you could do right now, rather than lock yourself into some sort of, it has to be this, and so it's just, it's hard to pinpoint one thing because I could just go many, many different ways. If I wanted a running back and then Sig grabbed my running back, then I zagged. I'm like, okay, I'm going wide receiver. If I was looking, quarterbacks, I grabbed one a little bit earlier than I normally do and then sat. And, that also, I mean, with these leagues, with the 2 quarterback, I really tried to lean into this year. Normally my second quarterback is a complete afterthought. But you could start 2 quarterbacks. And so this year, that's what I did because, and why I don't pay attention to this, when my brain tells me this in years past, but a quarterback's going to outscore everybody else 90% of the time. In a lot of these leagues, they're going to always put up. So Kirk Cousins, even though he didn't have a great year, still put a lot of money on the table for me. And ultimately the other thing too is I lucked into a great season by Aaron Jones, a great season by Alvin Kamara, Devontae Adams, there are some, and Josh Allen, and there are some big hitters in that group. And they covered a lot of down days by, David Moore, and you look at the rest of my wide receivers, Devontae Adams, and then it's Kendrick Bourne, Chad Hansen, DJ Moore, who actually was okay, Hunter Renfrow, Mike Williams, but Devontae Adams, that dude's going to fix a lot of weeks, and if I can roll Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones out most of the time, I'm going to do well most of the time. So, I mean, as always, blind luck at the table helps. So
there we have it. Andrew Garda, ladies and gentlemen, again, so instrumental in, one, just me as a person, but 2, also professionally, and just having that insight, telling us about Blog Talk Radio, because Bloom was actually in India on vacation and you're like, hey, there's this Blog Talk Radio thing. Why don't you try it out? I don't know why we picked Thursday, Andrew. I don't know if you remember that.
They were trying to make a Thursday night thing on Blog Talk. So was it Mark Ronick? Was that the guy who was in charge of it? And he was trying to make like a Thursday night lineup.
Oh, yeah.
So the Audible, they really wanted to link it in because the other shows they have, and and again, like the reality is, like even at the time, you could throw the fantasy football guys, Rants and Ray, like all of those. I don't want to talk about podcasts that have gone, but like all of those shows pulled numbers, but nothing like what the Audible did. So Mark wanted, if possible, something like the Audible to anchor that Thursday night, especially considering that was when Thursday night football was starting to become a little more of a regular thing, if I remember correctly.
Right. And
So,
for some reason, we decided to do 2 hours, and in the second hour, we'd always go crazy.
Yeah, second hour, we would kind of lose all focus. I'm looking at Sake's face. He's like, oh, God. Yes.
Yes. Great. No. That's where like the real journey begins.
The magic of the show was in the second hour, but that happens because of one Andrew Garda. Just appreciate you, brother. Rock and roll. Always love getting a text from you. Let's get a phone call in. Let's do stuff a little bit differently going forward, so we stay in touch a little bit better. But thank you very much for joining our celebration. We certainly appreciate your part in the history of this show.
Well, thanks. I'm touched that you guys feel I am a part of this. In the grand scheme of things, like the 40 years you've been doing it, I'm glad that I had a chance to dip in my toe. And and I thank you and Sig and Felletti every day, because like you guys basically were like, hey, like you're doing some really cool stuff, but nobody's seeing it. Like, why don't you help out? And like got me into a career now that I've had for 10 years. And like, even though some of that aspect is going to change, I wouldn't have gone to the NFL draft. I wouldn't have gone to Mobile and Senior Bowl. I wouldn't have gone to Vegas for the football guy stuff if it wasn't for you two guys and your support and everything through not only this, but a lot of other crap too. So, I love and appreciate both of you guys and the whole crew. And, I look forward to the day when we can all get together and hoist a beer again. So
that will be nice. He's Andrew Garda, ladies and gentlemen. Garda, be good, buddy. We'll talk soon.
See you guys later.
He's Andrew Garda. It's like a trip down memory lane today, Bloom.
It's like, what was the show like before we were born? This Is Your Life or something like that.
Right. This is your life.
And they would bring on people like it was their third grade teacher or,
Do you remember the Bugs Bunny version of that where it was, this is a life?
I wish I could. Bugs Bunny is important. We got to mention, someone mentioned Bugs Bunny
on the show. Yeah.
Someone mentioned Bugs Bunny in the chat room. Did you see that, Cease? They said that they're
no, I'm still trying to catch up on chat.
I know. Well, no, I know. I mean, I'm just catching what goes by. Thank you, everyone, for turning out, by the way. If you spent time, if you're listening right now after the fact, I don't know if you're going to release this, or if you were here with us live, thank you, folks. But they said that the end of the show, you'd play, always play Bugs doing the Hawaiian song.
I still do on the live show.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because, one, I love Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
And two, I always thought when I was like a machinist and stuff, and I was like, if I get my own radio show, I'm going to use sound bites because I love the drops. And that's why at the end of every show, there's a little, that's my signature on the show.
Yeah.
And I always said, if I get my own radio show, I'm going to have Bugs Bunny as the closing song. Yeah. So that's why I still use it. I know like Chase doesn't like it. I don't want to tell on Chase, but he's like, I like the show except for the Bugs Bunny. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I got to have Bugs, man. Sorry. And so the Thursday Night Live show will forever have that Bugs Bunny exit.
Yeah. And they said that the Bugs Hawaiian song helped their newborn fall asleep. That's one of their memories.
I didn't see that. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why they brought up Bugs Bunny. And, for me, it's always when I was in Juarez as a 3-year-old, the velvet painting capital of the world, I got a velvet painting Bugs Bunny. I wish I still had that. I wish I still had so many other things. But that's the thing. Yeah. We're absolutely looking back on the lifespan of this thing, of people who have been part of it, who've helped create it, or people who have inspired us, or people that have been inspired by the show. And it's just good, man. Again, I just want to come back, and if I can broadcast any message out to people that are taking time out to be with us today, It's just to take time out to celebrate what you've done in your life. And if you can hear my voice, you've done some remarkable things, you know. See, so I'll take it back to this. There's so many elders in New Orleans. You know what I mean when I say elders, Cease, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Elders, you know. Culture bearers, they call them too. Baba Luther was one. I was really lucky to be part of like a drum circle that he led in Congo Square, like the Congo Square, you know, where jazz started. Look up the story. Like Sundays, slaves were allowed to, not everywhere were slaves allowed to actually drum and participate in like their traditional dances and songs and things. But in New Orleans, at least partially because of I think the Spanish nature of the Spanish rule, that was allowed, and what grows out of it. And he was saying something basically like a prayer or a blessing for the drum circle, and Seth brought up something like something along the lines of I don't want to misquote him. You know, the gist of it was basically like saints, to become a saint, there has to be like two miracles, right? Isn't that right? 2 witnessed miracles, right? And he just brought up, and he was speaking specifically about the African American experience, the Black experience, that for everything that your ancestors had to endure, you're all miracles. Every one of you is a miracle, right? And I would expand that wonderful, beautiful sentiment out and say every one of us is a miracle. Everyone. And I think everybody has had things in their life worth celebrating, and will have more things in their life worth celebrating. And just to take time out to appreciate that. I say this always, all this stuff is always directed back at me first and foremost, right? Because like again, like I've been saying, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm becoming more comfortable as we go on, Cease. It's a good by the end of the
3.5 hours.
Right. An hour before I'll be like, okay, maybe I'm okay with this. Like opening up and really feeling that love and accepting that love that people send. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that's you know, on one hand, you're stopping everything to celebrate, but on the other hand, you're stopping everything and you're contemplating it and really, like you say, appreciate it too. And we're very lucky to be part of this, and it's been great, even on a personal level. You know, whether we're talking to Mark or Andrew or David, saying like, let's stay in touch, let's stay in each other's lives always, even if we don't work together as closely as we used to.
Right. I think it's important. To remember and important to have in each other's lives. Now, I did figure out how to upload that.
Oh, yes.
Special video. So do you want to go out with that, Bloom? I know we were supposed to go till 3:30 Eastern, but
I'm fine. Yeah. Well, no, let's go out with that.
We've said enough.
But can we tell a story? Can we tell the story for people who might not know the story before we play that?
Yes, I will allow you to tell the story, and then I will play the video, a very special video message from one of the largest luminaries that we've ever had on this show, and he was a very, very important part of this show. So yeah, I'll allow, because it was your impetus, Bloom.
Yeah.
And seeing this guy his like 3rd day on Twitter, and I remember you telling me about it, and I was like, pick him up. You know, it's like in Dumb and Dumber, like, get him on.
Yeah.
You told me about this guy, and I was like, get him on. And you reached out, and he was on, and it was great.
Yeah, that's your influence, Cease. That's your influence on me. So, yeah, and it was the great frontier. And again, I'll go back to one of our credos at Draft Guys, when you and Mark and I started Draft Guys together, was breaking down barriers. And Michael Schottey was talking about this earlier, too, about just hanging out with a player, getting to talk to them, you know, sponsored by whatever. And there was this idea that I think people were hungry for more coverage of football that was intellectual, that was erudite, that was at a higher level of discourse. And of course, people are always hungry for more authentic football takes and stories, right? I mean, like coming from a place of like, no, I know of what I speak. And it was also 2009 or 2010. It was right about the time that social media was really blowing up in terms of it was when iPhones became more affordable and everybody had that technology in their hand to like constantly be connected. And there's a whole other conversation about whether that's a good or bad thing. But somebody pops up on Twitter who used to be an NFL scout. I cannot remember the handle that he chose. And you could just tell when he would pop up to talk about something football related, that he was coming from a place of experience and not in some way to lord it over you and be like, I know and you don't because you haven't been there and I have, but just in a more generous way to cast things in terms of like, okay, you know, when I watch this, this is what I see. And still to this day, it's what he's doing. And, you know, aren't many things that I want to like pat myself or pat us on the back for, but I'm pretty sure that the first regular, or one of the first regular spots that Daniel Jeremiah, who Michael Schottey also mentioned earlier on the show, did was on our show. Was it Cease Take 5? Or what did you call it? Pick 5? Something like
Pick
that.
5, something like that. And we used to play the whole Jeremiah was a bullfrog song.
Yeah.
Just because. And he liked it, by the way.
Yeah. And we would just like shoot like the issues of the day and chew the fat on it. Because his takes were so authentic. And again, like, and I think he's doing this in a wonderful way in the sports media. When I reached out to him this week, I said, you know, you represent the good in sports media and in the football media. You can just see his soul. You know, you can just see that he is like a genuinely good, sweet human being, and he's got cred. I mean, he was a quarterback for Appalachian State. You know, he's been an NFL scout. And it's been incredible and wonderful and heartening to watch his status continue to grow from that time. And absolutely, we get 0% of the credit. It's more like a cool story that we can tell about our role in his story. And it was, I think, something, again, where it always comes back to just people who really love and are passionate about football, enjoying the stimulating nature of talking about it and listening to those people talk about it. So I think it's a great symbol, Cease, of what we've talked about a lot at the beginning of this journey, which was you get out there, you do good work, you just keep showing up and doing good work. You know who else I thought about this week, Cease? While we're getting a little more frequent? C.O. Brocato.
Oh, yes. The stories that, like, I'll ask Jeff Legwald about him because Leggy covered the Titans for years. And just Dane Brugler, best draft analyst that there is. Dane spent so much time with Mr. Brocato before his passing. Just, you want to talk about just open and genuine and giving. So giving, that knowledge, so giving, right? And that's the knowledge. I mean, Daniel Jeremiah, that knowledge, so giving, and such a great man.
Yeah. C.O. Brocato, for folks who don't know him, he invented the 3-cone drill. He invented it. I mean, talk about David and Bob Harris and Joe and people like that in the fantasy football industry. He's like that for scouting, you know. He's one of the originals. And he was still in his 80s. He was in his 80s, but still going to the All-Star games when we started. And I was, and I mean, there was only a couple of times I was really intimidated back in those days. One was just seeing Joe Green, who was scouting for the Steelers. I mean, come on. When we were kids, the Joe Green Coca-Cola commercial was like the ultimate, like, oh my God, it's him commercial.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, it was Joe Green. And C.O. Brocato, because of the just immense, and I would say also Gil Brandt, but actually my man, John, I miss you, man, at the 2006 draft just went right up and introduced me to Gil Brandt, who isn't it great? I got to say this again when I think of Gil Brandt. He's out there. He's still mixing it up, man. I know he just had like some sort of medical thing that he's doing better at.
Yeah.
I wasn't intimidated because somebody just threw me right in like, oh, there's Gil Brandt here. I'll introduce you to him. Anyway, C.O. Brocato would always see us, because C.O. Brocato was one of his lessons was like, you want to show up, because they did these area scout stuff where like you're responsible for scouting a whole area of the map. So you might have to scout like Texas Tech and New Mexico and New Mexico State and whatever, Texas A&M and Texas. And how do you get the seat right at the end of the 40-yard dash line so that your stopwatch is more accurate than anybody else's? Well, you know the equipment guy, the janitor, who's the one who opens up the gym where they're going to do the pro day. And you're there at 5:30 when he gets there. Or maybe the first time you go, you take a dozen donuts to him. And you say, thanks for everything you do to like make this work so that we can have this event today. And then the next time when that guy sees you, like he sees you at 5:30 in the morning and lets you in. So you have the best spot. Well, the work, putting in the work. And I was intimidated, and we talked about, and I'm sad. This is like the episode, honestly, I'm most sad that's like lost to the ether of Draft Guys TV was our interview with C.O. Brocato. That, you know, was such a great honor to get to interview him. And it took me like a lot.
That doesn't live on the DVD.
I don't know. Well, it might. It's not on. It's
Was
not.
it
It's a
season
season
one or
one. It
season
was season
two?
one. It was season
Oh,
one.
season one's on. I have season one.
Yeah.
I might just upload it to you.
We'll have to just put it up on YouTube again.
Yeah.
So I was nervous to go up and ask him if I could interview him. Like I was floored to like be in his presence and say, Mr. Bricado, you know, we're great respect for everything you've done in football and work you've done. You know, can I interview you about 5 or 10 minutes on camera? And he said yes. And I think what it was that he saw. So he was always one of the first to get there because he was still Titans. He was still working for the Titans. You know, the old Oilers.
Yep.
Right. And he saw that we were always one of the first ones there. And I think there was this mutual sense of like game recognized game, like respect. Like you're here for the work. You're here to work, and you love the work. And I think that it's really been a great journey that I think hopefully we have transmitted that value through our work. And that's why being associated with someone like Daniel Jeremiah or, you know, having Killer Kowalski, rest in peace. It's like the first Vito Stellino was on our show, you know? Vito Stellino.
Mike Reese told us, hey, watch out for this Wes Welker guy.
Yeah.
When they made the move to get Welker, and they're like, they really like him and he's going to be big. And we told that to the fantasy community because Mike Reese told us, and he was absolutely huge, man.
Yeah, it was one of the stories no one saw coming except for him. Mike Garofalo, who's now on NFL Network, was on the 5 Minute Drill with us. Anyway, so I think of all that stuff. I think of Daniel Jeremiah and the people that we can associate with. It's just, you know, in the story of this space, this place where all these things are being done, like our name's in there. And again, I feel like everyone that can hear the sound of my voice, you're all parts of probably more than one thing that is worth celebrating the same way that we're celebrating each other, celebrating. See, so I bring this back around. I want to also one more anecdote. I go on and on and on. Doing this crew of house floats thing, and it's awesome because I think it's been picked up at the BBC. Like, you know, New Orleans has some presence worldwide. People know New Orleans is in the circulatory system of not just the United States. And Mardi Gras is one of the big forward faces of New Orleans.
Do you know what I think New Orleans is, Bloom?
What's that?
And sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
I think New Orleans is Seneger. Do you know what Seneger is?
We've talked about it before, yeah.
Seneger is the one city, it's where Grim Jack was born. It's comic book people, where all dimensions come together.
Yeah.
It's the intersection. That's what New Orleans is.
It is. Well, Interzone, like for people that know, like Naked Lunch and William Burroughs. Absolutely. So it's become a story that instead, because we can't have parades this year for Mardi Gras, everybody is decorating their house like it's a float in a parade. And through the leadership of my beautiful, wonderful love of my life, my angel, as you called her, Cecil, Kate, like, and I've been a helper, although I've made a lot of calls. I've made a lot of creative decisions because she's just like, you make the call. I'm like, really? I make the call? Make the call. And I will put pictures up. And for those of you that will be in New Orleans or in New Orleans, I'll put out there our house float on Twitter, and we'd love for people to come by. And on Mardi Gras Day, we will have throws for people. We have got a lot of fun stuff in store. You know, because you might come by our house and get like a Jello shot, you know?
Oh, I like
maybe
that.
3 Jello shots. I don't know. Anyway, it is Mardi Gras Day. But what's great, Cease, is we're out there working, right? Like, I'll put the pictures up. Everyone will see. It's fantastic. We got all kinds of layers, like ideas. And now, of course, I'm like, oh, now if I would have thought about it, like we would have done this and this. What we're doing is 2 alligators are getting married in front of our house.
Okay.
We're having an alligator wedding because the theme of our neighborhood, Bayou St. John, is how sweet it is to be loved by you. So that was the spin on that, you know. But we're out there working, right? Like I go to City Park and I gather like a garbage bag of Spanish moss because we're making it look like a swamp. Like gators get married in the swamp. And Kate has strung all these lines that the wind have taken down a couple of times. It's not New Orleans if you don't have to rebuild, right? And we figure out, get thicker rope or something. And I'm out there draping the Spanish moss to create the scene. And people go by, people walk by, people go by on their bikes, people go by in their cars. And you know what happens like 95% of the time?
What's that?
They say, this looks great. You're doing great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This is awesome. We love it. As people go by. How wonderful is that?
Beautiful, dude.
How wonderful is that? And how everybody does that for us in the show. And I hope we do that in the ways that we can through the show and also in our lives. That it's just, your words can have so much impact. Something just as small as slowing down your car and rolling down the window and saying, you're doing great. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're putting into that. And it's happening all over New Orleans. All these little sparks of positivity, you know. I love that. I love what you're doing. It's beautiful. And I think it's something that we can carry into our lives every day. And and I think that certainly to end on a positive note from one of the most positive people and someone that we're proud to be associated with puts a punctuation mark on it.
Yes, a punctuation mark. And we've never played this before, so the audio should work. If you're in the chat room, let us know if it works, because I hope it does. Because we were kind enough to get a video message that I'm going to play for you all now. And, well, this cat needs no introduction, so here we go.
Cecil and Sigmund, 4,000 episodes. Are you kidding me? That is a lot of stinking good football podcast conversation. Hey, man, I just want to congratulate both you guys. Always appreciate what you guys did for me as I was just trying to navigate the media waters here in the podcast space. Right out of the scouting thing, you guys gave me a good platform and gave me a chance to really just talk ball with a couple good dudes, and always took something from you guys, always learned a little something as well. So congratulations, 4,000 episodes. It's a phenomenal accomplishment. Speaks to how great a job you guys have done. And here's to 4,000 plus many, many, many more. Again, congratulations, fellas. This is awesome.
Need we say more, man?
You the man. No, you the man. No, you the man. No, you the man.
Yeah, Daniel Jeremiah is the man. That's what that is. That's what that is. So when you sent me that, Bloom, I was like, that just makes me happy.
Oh, see, so I almost didn't want to open it up because I knew it was going to make my heart burst.
Yeah, just fantastic, man. Fantastic. Okay, well, this thing's a wrap. Almost 4 hours. I got a 3-hour show tonight, so probably a nap in my future. But hey, you get older, Bloom, naps are good.
Naps are great. Naps have always been good.
You know, my grandpa would go and he would get up at the crack of dawn. He'd get up at like 5 a.m. He'd go feed the horses and go ride horses and blah, 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 blah. And then he'd come in for lunch. And after lunch, he'd take about an hour nap. And then he'd come out and he'd start riding horses and feeding horses and blah, working cattle and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, go to bed probably 8 o'clock, something like that. But I always wondered, and now as I'm older, I'm like, that little power nap after lunch. Mwah.
Yeah. That's why siesta makes sense. You know, we should all have a little bit of time, hour or two in that middle of the afternoon when the sun is at its hottest, that we just spend time with each other, or spend time just, you know, put your feet up. And it's great to, you know, people like to put their feet up with us.
Whew. Thanks to Daniel Jeremiah. Thanks to Andrew Garda. Thanks to David Dodds. Thanks to Mark Felletti. Thanks to Jeff Hasley. Thanks to Bryant Krisztal. Thanks to Joe Bryant. Thanks to Charlie Campbell. Thanks to Matthew Barry. Thanks to Matt Waldman. Thanks to Austin Lee. Thanks to Chris Harp. Thanks to Michael Schottey. Thanks to Frank Schwab. That's a wrap. And thanks to you, Bloom. I love you much. True brother. And I have faith for humanity. Maybe sounds a little dramatic, but because of this show and because of our audience, because again, and I say it a lot, and if you listen to the show enough, you just kind of know we are pretty opposite in some things, and it doesn't matter at all, like at all, because we love each other and we respect each other. We respect each other's opinions, regardless of our views on anything. So if everyone just takes a little bit of that and knows, like, are there, you know, super crazy weirdos out there on either side of the aisle? Yes. Most of us are in the middle. And when you're in the middle, you can get along and, hey, how about this? How about this idea? How about this idea? The fact that we can share this love and this friendship and, you know, just the respect for each other. I think it's very important, Bloom. And most of us are like this. I understand in today's society, we're in a society where it's just the extremes that get the attention. Most of us are in the middle right here, and we all want pretty much the same thing. So go forward, be excellent to each other. And yeah, that's a wrap, everyone. He's Sigmund Bloom. I'm Cecil Lammey. I got chills. We are the Audible. Thanks for watching. Love you guys out there. Appreciate each and every one of you. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.